40 minutes before my wedding, my bride's room had everything in it except my bride. The dress bag hung open on the wardrobe door. Her shoes stood under the mirror, side by side, aimed at the door like they had lost an argument. Vivienne Sterling had left a hotel in flat shoes, which told me she had thought about the walking part well before the flowers arrived. The note was 4 lines long, written with the hotel's own pen. Adrian. I can't. It isn't you. Don't come looking. I read it twice. The first time for the words. The second time for anything underneath them. There was nothing underneath them. My bride had a gift for economy I had never once seen her use on a menu. Leo came in behind me without knocking, which is what he does when the news is bad enough to skip the ritual. He is my assistant. He has been my assistant for 4 years, and in that time he has developed the ability to look at a room and know how much of his weekend it is going to cost him. Feed is down, he said. I cut it before the ceremony music started. The press pen is closed. 2 of them are already asking why. On whose authority? Mine. I told the hotel it was a rights issue. He looked at the shoes. That buys you 20 minutes of quiet from the press. Maybe 25 if the caterer keeps them busy. It doesn't touch the ceremony clock. You did that before you came upstairs. I did that before I knew what was upstairs. He shrugged, once, without apology. If this goes out live, I spend the next 3 months answering the phone at home. I like my evenings, Adrian. I did it for me. That is the most honest sentence anyone said to me all day, and it was not yet 1 o'clock. I counted it out loud, because that is what I do when a day starts eating itself. 200 guests downstairs. 3 trade reporters who had been invited on purpose, by me, because I wanted them to write the word solid. A joint venture with Sterling Fabrication that I had pushed through against my own chief operating officer, in a meeting where she used the phrase sentimental capital twice and did not blink either time. On Monday, when the board sat down, and the founder's lockup expired, and every person in that room got to decide what my judgment was worth in public. The wedding was not the deal. The wedding was the proof that I believed in the deal. Take the proof away, and by Monday afternoon I would be a man who had bought an old family name at retail and been handed a receipt for the wrong item. Say something, Leo said. I'm working. You're counting. That is what my working sounds like. The door opened again, and Roland Sterling came in the way weather comes in. He is 59, he has a voice built for factory floors, and he had spent the morning telling anyone who slowed down that his daughter had never looked better. Now he looked at the empty room and did the thing I have watched him do in every negotiation we have ever had. He decided what had happened before he found out what had happened. She's nervous, he said. That's all this is. She's gone. She's nervous, and she's gone, and she'll be back by this evening. He picked up the note, read it, and put it face down on the dresser, as though the words would keep better that way. I'll bring her back myself. You announce a postponement. Say she's unwell. Say she fainted, say the heat, say whatever you like, nobody checks a bride's blood pressure. Behind him his wife came in and closed the door with both hands, the way you close a door when the noise is the thing you actually mind. Roland, Elaine said. People can hear you in the corridor. Let them hear me. They will. That was the whole of her contribution to the question of where her daughter had gone. She stayed in that room for the rest of it and never asked it once. No, I said. Roland turned around. No what? No to the illness. 200 people saw her at the rehearsal last night eating oysters and arguing about the seating. There is a doctor at table 9. There is a photographer who has been in that suite twice this morning. If I stand up and say she's unwell, I have lied about a fact that half that room can check by supper, and on Monday I get to explain to my board why the first thing I did under pressure was lie about something small. It's a courtesy. It's a verifiable statement. I don't make those unless they're true. It's the only rule I've got that has ever paid for itself. Roland put his hands on the dresser and leaned. Then we postpone without a reason. A postponement without a reason is a reason. You are being difficult about vocabulary while my daughter is in the wind. I'm being difficult about the only part of today I still control. My phone buzzed against my hip. I looked at it, and it was Priya Raman, who runs my operations and had not been invited to the wedding because she had told me, in writing, that attending would compromise her position. She had made that sound like a courtesy too. I took it. Is it true? She said. Which part? The part where there is no bride, and I have 4 missed calls from a man at the venue who has not been paid since March by a company we are 3 weeks from underwriting. That's Sterling's supplier. That is a company we are 3 weeks from underwriting, she said again, in exactly the same voice, which is how she wins most of her arguments. Adrian. Close it. Today, tomorrow, Monday. The joint venture doesn't work with a wedding and it doesn't work without one. It never worked. That is not me being unkind about your personal life. I know it isn't. Good. Then don't spend anything else on it. She hung up. She has never once said goodbye, and she has never once been wrong in a way that helped me. Roland was watching my face the way you watch a card table. That was your director, he said. That was my director. And she wants the deal dead. She has wanted the deal dead since the day I proposed it. He straightened up, and I watched him stop being furious and start being arithmetic. It took about 2 seconds. It is the fastest thing I have ever seen him do. Then you need this wedding more than I do, he said. I need today more than you do. You need every day after today more than I do. Let's not pretend either of us is doing the other one a favor. Leo cleared his throat from the doorway. 19 minutes, he said. The string quartet has started repeating itself. That's a sound people notice. Here is what I decided, standing in a room with a dress bag and a pair of abandoned shoes, and I decided it in less time than it takes to describe. The 200 people downstairs had not come to watch me marry a woman. Most of them had met Vivienne twice. They had come to watch a Voss and a Sterling stand in the same place at the same time and look like a decision that had already been made. That is what the reporters were there to write down. That is what my board was going to read on Monday morning with their coffee. The bride was gone. The name was still in the building. Roland, I said. Who else is a Sterling? He looked at me like I had asked him something in another language. What? In this hotel? Right now. Who else in this building is a Sterling? That's, he made a gesture that took in the whole floor, the corridor, the whole afternoon. That's not a question. It's the only question. Answer it. There's nobody, he said. There is nobody in this building by that name who can stand up in front of 200 people in 20 minutes. And Roland Sterling, who had spent 4 months telling me about the strength of his family, stood in the middle of a hotel suite and meant it. It was Elaine who said it, from the wall, without moving. Wren. The room did that small ugly thing rooms do when everybody remembers something at once. Wren, I said. Our younger daughter, Elaine said, and then, because I must have taken half a second too long, Wren. You've met her. I had. 3 times. Once at a site visit, once at a birthday dinner, once at the rehearsal the night before, where I had shaken her hand and said something pleasant and then turned to answer a question about tooling costs, and I could not, standing there, have told a court what color her hair was. That is not a flattering thing to know about yourself at 12 minutes past 1 on your wedding day, and I have had a long time since to find a kinder way to put it, and there isn't one. Where is she? I said. She'll be downstairs, Roland said. She's always somewhere. Where downstairs? He didn't know. Elaine looked at the carpet, and said, try the service corridor. She doesn't like the main room. I went. The main room was doing what a room does when it has been waiting too long. People had started to circle their own tables. Somebody's child was under the cake table. A woman I had never met told me I looked handsome and then looked at my face and stopped talking. Leo walked ahead of me with his phone against his ear, saying the word absolutely to somebody in a tone that meant no. The service corridor smelled like warm plates. There was a door at the end with a laminated sign about fire regulations, and the door was propped open with a folded chair, and inside, sitting on an upturned crate between a dish rack and a stack of tablecloths, was the woman I married about half an hour later. Wren Sterling had a slice of wedding cake on a napkin on her knee. She had a canvas bag at her feet, and out of the top of the canvas bag came the head of an animal I could not immediately name, and she was feeding it a piece of icing off the end of her finger. She saw me and stood up so fast the crate went over. Sorry, she said. Sorry. I'll move. Is this, do you need this room? No. He's not allowed in the main room. I know that. I checked. She put her hand flat over the bag, protectively, without seeming to notice she was doing it. He can't stay in the car. It's too warm in the car. 2 hours in a car at this temperature is how you kill an animal like this, so I brought him in, and I've been in here the whole time. Nobody's touched the food except me, and I only took the cake because it was already cut. I was going to eat it and drive him home before the speeches. That was the plan for today. What is he? She stopped. It clearly was not the question she had prepared for. A ferret, she said. His name is Otto. Otto steals, she said. Small bright things. If anything's missing later it'll be under something. She looked at me properly for the first time, and I watched her notice what I looked like. You're up here. I am. You're supposed to be down there. The music's been going round again. My bride is not in this building, I said. She left a note. 4 lines. Nobody knows where she is, and your father is upstairs telling my assistant that she'll be back by supper, which is a thing he is saying because he needs it to be true, not because it is. I have replayed that moment more times than is good for me, because of what she did with her face, which was nothing at all. She went to the musician, Wren said. Do you know that? No. I'm guessing. She picked the crate up and set it back on its feet, and she did it neatly, the way people do who have worked in rooms where things get put back. She's been happy for about 3 weeks. She's not happy when things are going well. She's happy when she's decided something. And you didn't say anything. To who? I did not have an answer to that, and she did not press it, and that is the first thing I ever learned about Wren Sterling. She asks a question that takes the floor out from under you and then she doesn't stand on the hole. There was a piece of glass on the crate where she had been sitting. Green, thick, about the size of a plum, with a curved break down one side. She saw me looking and put it in her pocket, and it went in with a sound that said there were others in there already. Sorry, she said. Habit. What is it? Cullet. Broken batch. It's from a job. She said it fast, the way you say something you have been mocked for. Then, when I didn't say anything, she added, the break tells you what went wrong. That one cooled too quickly at the edge. You can see it in the line. My family has made glass for 3 generations. I have sold more of it than I could count and I have never once looked at a broken edge and known what it was telling me. That was 30 more words than she had spent on anything else, and they came out at a completely different speed, and I filed that away, because filing things away is the only talent I have that has never failed me. How long have you been in this room? I said. 1.5 hours. Is there a seat for you out there? She looked at the wall for a moment. There's a table, she said. It's fine. There were people who confirmed late, which is not the same answer, and both of us knew it. 19 minutes had become 12. I could hear the quartet through the wall, going round again on a piece of music that was written to last 90 seconds. I have made a lot of decisions in rooms with better lighting than that one, and I have never made one faster. Wren, I said. I need you to marry me. Today. In about 10 minutes. She was holding the napkin with the cake on it. She did not drop it. I want that on the record too, because everybody who has heard this story since has assumed she dropped it. No, she said. I had been ready for a lot of answers. That one was so fast it had clearly been sitting there, fully assembled, since long before I walked in. You haven't heard the terms. I don't need the terms. I know what happens after. She put the cake down on the crate, and she wiped her fingers on the napkin, one at a time, and she did it with the kind of calm that costs a person something to produce. You'd pay money. I'd pay at every dinner for the rest of my life. That isn't the same currency, Mr. Voss, and I'm the only one in this room who has to spend both. Adrian. I know your name. I'm using the other one on purpose. Out in the corridor somebody dropped a tray of cutlery, and behind that noise, coming closer, was Roland. Wren. A door slammed further up. Wren, is she in there with you? He went absolutely still. Not frightened. It was more specific than that. It was the stillness of somebody who has heard a particular voice at a particular volume enough times to know exactly how long the next 4 minutes are going to take. He thinks Vivienne's in here, she said quietly. He does. He'll come in, and he'll look at me, and he'll ask me where she is, and when I say I don't know he'll say it twice more in case the answer changes. The handle went down. The door was still propped with the folded chair, and Roland shoved it, and the chair jammed, and he shoved it again. Wren. Open this. It's open, she said. It's the chair. Then move the chair. Is your sister in there? Wren. Is she with you? Because if you have been sitting in a store cupboard while that girl walks out of a church. There isn't a church, Wren said. It's a hotel. There was a pause on the other side of the door of a length I can only describe as expensive. Don't be clever with me today, her father said. Not today. Where is she? I don't know. Where is she? I don't know. Do you understand what she has done to this family? Do you understand what your sister has just cost us? Because you are standing in there with an animal in a bag, and out there are 200 people, and one of them is your mother, and one of them is the man who was about to save this company. And I stood in the middle of that little room with the dish racks and listened to Roland Sterling make my argument for me, at volume, through a door, for free. I did not say a word. There was nothing I could have added. And his voice dropped, and it got worse. You are going to go out there and you are going to tell them she's ill. You're good at that. Nobody looks at you. She flinched. It was very small. If I had not been looking straight at her I would have missed it, and I have thought since that this is probably the entire history of that family in one sentence. No, she said, to the door, and her voice did not carry at all. He didn't hear it. He was already going. We listened to him get further away down the corridor, shouting his wife's name. Wren looked at the floor for a moment. Then she turned round and looked at me, and something in her face had changed address. Terms, she said. I put my jacket over the back of the chair, because I have found that men who stand up straight in expensive suits make people agree to things, and I did not want her agreeing to anything. All of it, as it is, I said. No pitch. You'll hear the ugly parts in the same voice as the rest. That would be new. 1 year. A real marriage on paper, a fake one in fact. You appear in public with me when it matters. I would guess 11 or 12 times, and I will tell you each one at least a week ahead, and if I get that wrong you can hold it against me. You live in my building. Separate rooms, separate doors, and the door on your side locks from the inside. Why? Because you don't know me, and a person who doesn't know me should have a lock. She nodded once, like a fact had been correctly filed. Your loans, I said. The bank one. The education one, the real one, in your name. How do you know about that? Your father told me. At dinner in March. In front of the table. Her jaw moved. Go on, she said. Gets paid off, in full, in the first week, by transfer, and there's a receipt with your name on it and not mine. Second thing. Money to start your own workshop. Not a hobby budget. Enough for a kiln, a year of rent on a working unit and a year of not panicking. How much? I told her. She sat down on the crate. She did not say anything at all for a moment, and then she said, that's not a favor. That's a wage. Say it's a wage. It's a wage. Good. Because I don't take gifts. There's a string on gifts and the string is you're not allowed to be angry afterwards. It's a wage. It's in the agreement and it's in writing and you can read every word of it before you sign. And what does it buy you? Monday, I said. It buys me a room full of people who saw Voss marry a Sterling, and a board that reads about a solid arrangement instead of a spectacle. That's what I'm buying. I'm not buying your affection, I'm not buying your family, and I am not buying the right to tell you what to do at any point in the next year. Those are not on the table because I can't afford them. And when the year's up, there's a date. It's in the paper. You leave on that date with everything I've listed and nothing owed to me. I don't come after you, I don't make it awkward, and I don't make a story out of it. She looked at me for a long moment. You've done this before, she said. Not this. But something shaped like this. I've bought a lot of Mondays. Have you ever bought a person? There it was. 1:30 on a Saturday in a storeroom, and a woman I had met 3 times and could not describe had put the exact question on the table, in the exact words, and I want to be honest about what I did with it. I said, no. And I believed it. Then let's not start today, she said. I'll do it. My conditions. Say them. I want them written down. Not because I don't trust you. She stopped. That's not true. It is because I don't trust you. I'll write them and you'll sign them and then there's no version where somebody remembers it differently at a dinner. There was no paper in that room. There was a stack of napkins on the shelf above the dish rack, the good ones, the heavy linen look ones. She took one off the top and laid it flat on the crate and smoothed it with the side of her hand, and she took a carpenter's pencil out of her jacket pocket. That told me something about the jacket and rather more about the woman, and I stopped being able to predict anything about the rest of my year. 1, she said, writing. You don't lie to me. Not by leaving things out either. Even when it costs you something. That's a wide clause. It's the only one I actually care about. She didn't look up. Everybody in my family tells me the truth about 8 days late, when there's nothing I can do with it. 8 days late is a decision they make for me. If you're going to make decisions for me, I'd rather you did it in the open where I can see them and be angry about them properly. I have thought about those 2 sentences a great deal since, and I did not think about them at all at the time. Agreed, I said. 2. Otto stays. He lives where I live. He's a rescue, he's got 1 bad kidney, and he is not going to a facility because your building has a policy. My building has a policy. Then your building can have a different policy. Agreed. 3. The workshop money is mine at the end, whatever happens. Whatever happens. If the deal dies on Monday, if you change your mind in a month, if I'm unbearable, if you're unbearable. It's a wage and I've worked the day. Agreed. 4. She stopped, and this one took her longer. Nobody from my family comes into your house. Not for coffee. Not for an emergency. Not because it's Christmas. If they want me, they can have me somewhere else, on ground I chose. Agreed. She wrote it out and then she stopped with the pencil an inch off the napkin, and then she wrote a 5th line, and turned the napkin round so I could read it. I read it twice. That one's against you, I said. I know what it is. You've just written that I can end it early. Any time in the year. No payment, no notice, no penalty. You'll want to, she said. Somewhere around month 4 you'll be sitting in a meeting and you'll think, I could have had a quiet year, and if there's a penalty in the way, you'll stay in it and you'll be pleasant to me about it, and I would rather be left than be tolerated. I've had tolerated. It's worse, and you keep the workshop money. That's clause 3. I put it before this one on purpose. She was 24 years old. She had been sitting in a store cupboard for an hour and a half with a ferret and a slice of somebody else's cake, and she had just built me a better contract in 4 minutes than my legal department builds in a fortnight, and she had put the only unprotected clause in it on her own side. I signed under her name. She signed under mine. While we were doing it, Otto came out of the bag, went along the shelf with the unhurried confidence of a creature who has never once been prosecuted, and took the cufflink out of my left sleeve. Wren said his name in a voice like a slammed drawer. He went under the dish rack. He'll bring it back, she said. He does bring things back. Eventually. Usually. Keep it, I said. It's a set of 2. It'll teach me something about symmetry. And she laughed. It was 1 syllable and it was gone immediately, and she looked almost annoyed that it had happened, and it was the first sound of anything in that entire building that had not been organized in advance by somebody I was paying. Give me the napkin, she said. I'll put it somewhere. I'll take it. You'll lose it in a jacket. She folded it and put it in her pocket with the broken glass, and I let her, which is a decision I have had a great deal of time to review since. Then she stood up, and looked down at herself, and I watched the whole thing arrive. I'm wearing gray, she said. I'm wearing gray and I've got icing on my sleeve and my shoes are wet because it rained on the way in and I parked at the back. You look like a person who wasn't expecting to be looked at. That's exactly what I look like. She pressed her hands flat down the front of her skirt. They're going to say he took the spare. They're going to say it in that room, today, while I'm standing there. Some of them will. You're not going to tell me they won't. You'd know I was lying and you'd have caught me on clause 1 before the ceremony started. She breathed out. All right, she said. All right. Let's go before I think about it. We went up the service stairs, because I was not walking her through that room like an announcement. Leo met us on the landing with his phone still in his hand, and he stopped. He looked at her. He looked at me. He looked at the bag on her shoulder, and the head that came out of it, and back at me. Right, he said. Cut the ceremony, I said. Everything optional goes. Readings, the second piece of music, the thing with the candles. Vows, rings, register, done. You're 11 minutes late, he said, already walking. 6 more and I stop being able to explain it. I'll take the candles out of the room, because if they're in the room somebody will light them. Roland was waiting at the top of the stairs. He had gone past furious and out the other side into something worse, which is a man doing sums. He saw his daughter. It took him a second, honestly, a full second, and then he saw the whole thing. Absolutely not, he said. It's decided, I said. It is not decided, it is not remotely decided, she is not. He turned on her. Do you have any idea what you look like? Go and sit down. Go and sit down and let the adults find a way through this. Wren was holding the strap of the bag with both hands. No, she said, not loudly. She said it in the flattest voice in the world, and it went through that stairwell like a drop tray, because that was the first time in 24 years anybody in her family had heard the word from her in a place where other people could hear it too. Her mother was 3 steps down. A waiter was on the landing with a tray of glasses and had stopped moving entirely. Roland went red from the collar up. "You will not embarrass this family twice in one afternoon." "I'm not doing anything to the family," Wren said. "I'm getting married. You can come or you can stay here," and she walked past him. I want to be precise about what happened to her body when she did it, because I was directly behind her. Her hands were shaking so badly by the time she reached the top step that she put them in her pockets, and I heard the broken glass move, and she kept them in there right up until the door of the main room opened. Then she took them out, and put them at her sides, and went in. 200 people do not gasp together. That is a thing that happens in stories. What actually happens is worse and much slower. A table near the door stops talking. Then the 2 tables behind it stop, because the first one stopped. Somebody at the back laughs, once, before they understand. 3 phones come up. A woman in the second row leans across and says something to her husband with her hand over her mouth, and he says something back without bothering to cover his at all. Half the room worked out what they were watching in about 15 seconds and the other half were still waiting for Vivienne to come in behind us. One of the 3 reporters I had invited on purpose wrote in his notebook without once looking down at it. The officiant was a small calm woman who had done this for years and had clearly been briefed on the stairs by Leo, because she did not blink. She asked me a question and I answered it. She asked Wren a question and Wren answered it in a voice that reached about 4 rows. I did not hold her hand, because the agreement did not cover it and neither of us had said anything about it, and I was not going to start the year by taking something that had not been offered. Roland came in halfway through and stood at the back, and did not sit down, and did not leave. Elaine sat in the front row with her hands in her lap and looked at the floral arrangement. It took 11 minutes. We signed a register in a side room with a window that looked out onto the delivery yard, and while the officiant was blotting the page, Wren looked up at the glass above the door, where the atrium light came through in a long panel. "That's going to fail," she said. "What is?" "That corner. Look at the line in it, where it changes color. It's been annealed too fast and the frame's been fitted tight, and it's south-facing." She pointed with her chin, because both her hands were still shaking. "Not today. 2 years, maybe 3. Somebody will say it was vandalism." The officiant said congratulations to both of us. We went out through the delivery yard because Leo had brought the car around the back. It was raining properly by then. Wren got in with the bag on her knees, and Otto put his head out and looked at the leather of my back seat with an interest I did not care for. Leo shut the door and got in the front and said, "Home." Nobody answered him for about a minute and a half. Then Wren said, "Does the building have a laundry room or does somebody do it?" "Somebody does it. I'll do my own." "That's not in the agreement." "Nothing about the actual living is in the agreement," she said. "We wrote a wedding. We didn't write a Tuesday." She took the napkin out of her pocket and unfolded it on her knee and read it again, the whole way across town, with the rain going sideways on the window and a ferret asleep in the crook of her arm. I looked at it upside down, at the 5 clauses in builder's pencil with my signature under hers. Clause 1 looked like the cheap one. The flat is gray. It is gray on purpose, and it cost a serious amount of money to make it look as though nothing had ever happened in it. Wren stood in the middle of it with a suitcase in one hand and a cardboard box in the other and turned round once, slowly, the way you look at a room you are going to have to clean. "Where do I put things?" "Anywhere." That isn't an answer. That's what people say just before they mind. Everything past the second door is yours. Bedroom, bathroom, the room with nothing in it. The lock on your door works. I tried it this afternoon. You tried it this afternoon. I said it would lock from the inside. I don't say things I haven't checked. She put the box down on a console table chosen for me by a man with a diploma. It left a ring of grit. Neither of us has mentioned that since. "Anything in here I should hide?" "Small, bright, not screwed down." I looked round a room I had lived in for 4 years and could not have listed its contents under oath. She opened the cage anyway. Otto came out with his belly on the floor, ran the length of the skirting board and went under the sofa with the confidence of an animal who has already read the lease. One thing had to be said before she slept, because of clause 1, and I said it standing up, which is how you do the things you would rather do sitting down. The bank instruction went from the car. It shows Monday when they open. Whole balance, receipt in your name and your address, not mine. She put her hand out. "Show me." "Not thank you." "Not you didn't have to." Show me. She read it twice, once for the number and once for whatever is underneath a number. That's right to the penny. You know it to the penny. I've known it to the penny for 6 years. It's what I think about in queues. Leo came up at 9:30 and put a sheet in a plastic sleeve on the counter with a magnet on top of it, in a kitchen where nothing has ever been attached to anything. I've done you a week. Both of you. It's easier as one document. She read it standing up. Under her name, in smaller type, it said wardrobe and hair at 6:45. She took the sheet out of the sleeve, took the carpenter's pencil out of the jacket she was still wearing over the gray dress at 9:30 at night in my kitchen, and wrote on the back of Leo's week. Sunday, 7 until 2. Halloran's. What's Halloran's? Where I work. Leo and I looked at each other. It is not a flattering thing, 2 grown men doing that. I have 4 days a week on somebody else's kiln and I pay for 2 of them in shifts. If I don't do the shifts, I don't get the bench. If I don't get the bench, I'm a woman with a box of broken glass and an anecdote. We can buy the shifts out. No. It's one phone call. That is the entire reason. No. Leo had been in the room 20 minutes and had understood more of it than I had. He wrote Halloran's into his own book, Sunday and Wednesday, without being asked. And this one. She tapped the top line. This is public. It's 4 minutes on a pavement. You said 11 or 12 times, a week's notice each. That's for the 11 or 12. This is a doorstep. Then tell me the difference. There is no difference. I had known there was none when I said the clause out loud in a store cupboard, sounding generous. There isn't one. The notice failed. Hold it against me. I'm going to, she said, and wrote that on the back of the week as well. Leo left at 10. At the door he said, she's going to be a great deal of work. For whom? For you. I'm going to be fine. The message came at 11:10 to both of us, because my wife has never changed a phone number and her father has never had to look one up. He had given it a heading. The heading was Terms of Reconciliation. 1. Saturday to be treated as a private family matter and not discussed outside the family. 2. The marriage to be ended quietly and without documentation inside the month. 3. Vivienne to be returned to her position, and the original agreement to stand as signed. 4. Wren to come home, where she can be looked after properly. 5. The matter of her education, which this family carried for 2 years without complaint, to be discussed at that time. She read it on the counter without picking the phone up. He's done a heading. He does headings. He did one when I left the first course. That one had an annex. I read the 5th line again. How much is it? There isn't an amount. There's always an amount. Not with him. She turned the phone face down. 9 years, and he has never once said a figure. Not to me, not in front of my mother. If he said a figure, I could pay it and it would be finished, and then he'd have nothing. I sent the transfer this morning. That was the bank. The bank has a number and a date and an address and somebody at the end of a phone who has to be polite to me. This isn't the bank. It's the same money. It isn't money at all. He never lent me anything. He mentions it. I picked up the phone, because that is what I do. I had the number, and 2 clean sentences, and both of them were true. Don't. I can end this tonight. You can end tonight. Then it's you who did it, and he tells that story for 20 years, and in his version I'm the thing you had to deal with. He tells it that way already. He tells it to me. If you do it, he gets to tell other people, and they'll believe him, because it will be true. You will have dealt with me. I put the phone down. It cost me something, and I am fairly sure she saw the exact figure. Then what do you want done about it? Nothing. Everyone who has ever tried has made it bigger. It's weather. You don't argue with weather, you stop standing in it. I have sent lists with headings on them, I said. To people who worked for me for 10 years. She looked up. I know. I signed one this afternoon on a napkin. We ended up on opposite sides of the island at midnight, because neither of us was going to be the first to go to bed while the other one was still awake. There was no food in that kitchen. There never is. She fetched a plastic box out of her bag with 2 slices of wedding cake in it. The kitchen was on our way out through the yard. I took mine, and I took Vivienne's, because it was going in a bin, and I have never once been able to watch that happen. She put half in front of me on a piece of kitchen roll. It was the first thing anybody had given me all day that I had not paid for. They'll ask why, she said. tomorrow. Somebody asks why you married me, somebody asks why I said yes, and if those two don't match we're finished before lunch. Our families have known each other for years, the wedding was going ahead, and we made the decision together. She thought about it for longer than the line deserved. Which parts of that are true? The families. And the wedding was going ahead. So it's a lie standing on two true things. Most sentences are. Not mine. She put the fork down. Say what you like about me. Say I'm difficult. Say nobody knows who I am. Say you married a stranger in a service corridor. I'll stand next to all of it. But don't put a we in it that wasn't there. A we is checkable. Somebody will ask my mother. That's clause 1. That's clause 1 from your end. You keep thinking clause 1 is for me. Then we did the small things, because small things are what people get caught on. Middle name. Haven't got one. Everybody has one. Vivienne has 2. There was a pause of a particular quality. That isn't a complaint. It's just where they stopped. Yours. Peter. After nobody. My mother liked the shape of it in a signature. What were you doing yesterday morning? Before any of this, hanging a kiln down. 240 pieces of somebody else's border tile, from 600 degrees, in steps, over about 12 hours, and there is no clever way to do it. You sit with it. You have to be there for the last step. Rush the last step and the stress stays in the glass, and it looks perfect, and it stays perfect, and then one afternoon 2 years later it comes apart on its own and somebody says vandalism. Like the panel over the door. She looked up. You were listening. I file things. That isn't the same. No, I said. It isn't. She unfolded the napkin on the counter at about 1 and read it through again. Where does this live? There's a safe. Where? Behind something. I've never opened it. You own a safe and you don't know where it is. It came with the flat. That is the most expensive sentence anybody has said to me today. She folded it, put it under her keys, and said she would find somewhere for it in the morning. In the morning it was not there. Have you moved a napkin? She was at the counter at 6:20, entirely calm. No. Right. Right what? Bright things and soft things. The bright ones are for him. The soft ones go in the bed. She picked up her keys, which had not been touched, being bright but heavy. That is our contract. That is a linen-look napkin with builder's pencil on it. It was never much, legally. I'll take the flat apart. You'll frighten him and he'll move it somewhere worse. There's a gap under those kitchen units that goes back further than you would like. How long does he take? The cufflink comes back today. A sock of mine took 8 months. She put the kettle on, in my kitchen, which nobody had ever done. You remember what's on it? All 5. So do I. Then it's exactly what it was at 1:30 yesterday. You just can't put it in a folder now. The rail arrived at 6:30, wheeled out of the service lift by 2 people in black, followed by Leo, who had plainly not been to bed. I rang Delphine at midnight. She already had a rail built under the account. It's finished, it's paid for and it's here. I am not proud of the hour. I am extremely proud of the logistics. Wren went along it the way you go along a rail. Then she stopped, took a sleeve between 2 fingers and turned back the collar of a coat to look at the inside of it. She said nothing for long enough that Leo stopped talking about logistics. This is my sister's. Leo's face did the thing a face does when a man who is good at people finds out he has been good at scheduling instead. The account name is Sterling. I asked for the Sterling rail. Yes. It's the wedding week. The dinners, the travel, he stopped 1 word early. It's the honeymoon, she said. It's all right. It's what was there. It is not all right, Leo said, and he meant it, and in 4 years it was the first position I had heard him take on anything that was not a timetable. She could have had that room. Anybody else would have taken it. She reached past him for the folder under his arm, turned it blank side up and held her hand out for a pen. List 2 pairs of trousers that survive a hot wash. Cotton, nothing synthetic above my waist, because synthetic doesn't burn, it melts onto you. Pockets on everything, and pockets that carry a kilogram, because I don't put a bag down on a workshop floor. Boots I can already walk in, which means second-hand, which means I get them and Delphine doesn't. And one thing for the 11 or 12 times. 1. I'll choose it, and it will be dull. Dull, Leo said, writing. They'll be photographing you. They'll be photographing him. I want to be the part of the picture nobody has an opinion about. Color. Gray. Which gray? Any of them. He wrote it all down, and underneath it he wrote something else and underlined it twice and did not show me what it was. Take the rail back. Tell Delphine the truth. The truth is that we tried to put the new wife into the old wife's clothes at 6:30 in the morning, Leo said. I'll find a way of saying it that lets me go on working with her. We went down at 20 to 8. 2 photographers, and Martin Ferris from the Trade Weekly, who had been at the wedding on my own invitation and had written the whole thing down without once looking at his notebook. In the lift I gave Wren 3 lines. They were good lines. One of them had been through a board. She listened to all 3 and said, "All right," in a voice I did not yet know well enough to be frightened of. Ferris asked me 2 straight questions and I answered them straight. Then he turned about 90 degrees and asked her, which is why he is the only one of those 3 I still invite to anything. Mrs. Voss. She didn't answer. She had been Mrs. Voss for 18 hours and nobody had said it out loud yet. He tried again. Sorry. Yes. Were you a guest at the wedding yesterday? Yes. And then you were the bride? Yes. When did you find out you were getting married? About 40 minutes before. A camera went. Beside me, Leo stopped breathing in a way I could hear. 40 minutes. There was a folding chair holding a door open. I was on the other side of it with a piece of cake. And you said yes. Not straight away. Why did you say yes at all? I had a line for that. It was the best of the 3. My mouth was already open. He asked me, she said. People in my family tell me things afterwards. Nobody had put a question to me and then stood there waiting for the answer in quite a long time. I wanted to see what happened next. Ferris wrote that one down, and this time he had to look at the notebook to do it. Are you in love with him? Leo moved half a step. I did not move at all. It had reached me about 2 seconds too late to be any use that I had no idea what she was going to say, and no right whatever to want a particular answer. Met him properly yesterday afternoon. That isn't an answer. It's the only one I've got that's true. Ask me at Christmas. Mr. Voss. Same question. There was nothing checkable in it in either direction, which meant that for once I had nowhere to stand except on what I actually thought. I've known her for a day. Anyone who tells you more than that in front of a camera is lying or a fool, and my board would rather I was neither. And then I said the part one had not planned. She is the only person in that hotel yesterday who told me the truth without being asked to. I have had a long run of the other kind. Print that. Ferris looked up. All of it. All of it. What frightened me on that pavement was not that she might get it wrong. I had spent the whole lift preparing for wrong. She got it right, on the record, without me, out of material I had not supplied and could not have supplied. I have made a career out of knowing what people are about to say. She left for Halloran's at 8:10 in her own clothes with the glass box under one arm. Leo offered the car twice. She took the bus, because the car was mine and the shift was hers. I stood in the entrance of a building I own and watched my wife of 18 hours get on a bus, and could not think of one thing I was permitted to do about it. The piece runs tonight, Leo said behind me. It'll be better than good. Fine. That's the problem. The board reads it before they sit down, and then every one of them is going to want to meet her. Otto brought the cufflink back at about 10, into the middle of the kitchen floor, clean, in the one place in that room where a person walking in would tread on it. I looked for the napkin for an hour and a half. I moved a sofa that had taken 3 men to put there. I found a pen, a coin, and a piece of green glass the size of a plum with a curved break down one side, which had not come out of any room of mine. I did not find the napkin. So I put the cufflinks away as a matching pair and left the glass on the counter where she would see it. Rules had been up for one night. One of them was already on the back of a bus timetable, the only copy of the rest was in a nest under my kitchen units, and on Monday morning my board was going to ask to meet my wife. The board sits on the top floor of a building where every internal wall is glass. That was my mother's idea, and it is the most quoted decision she ever made. You can see every argument in the company from the lift. You cannot hear one of them. They had all read the piece. I knew that before anybody spoke, because 3 of them said good morning to me and one of them said it twice. Priya had circulated a note at 6:10. 4 pages, no adjectives. She did not open with my marriage. She never opens with the thing you are braced for. Sterling Fabrication has not paid its tooling supplier since March, she said. That is not a rumor. I rang him on Saturday. We are 3 weeks from underwriting a joint venture with a company that cannot pay the men who makes its dyes. That's one supplier. It's the one who makes the dyes. Everything else in that building is downstream of him. They have an order book. They have letters of intent. I've read all 9. 2 are from the same group under 2 names, and 1 is from a company that dissolved in April. Counted it out loud, because the alternative in that room is inventing something. The venture gives us pressed and toughened capacity in the north without buying a plant. Building it ourselves is 2 years and a figure nobody at this table wants to say. Renting it is 18 months and a break clause. I put both on page 3. You didn't read page 3, because page 3 is boring, and boring is where the answer was. That is the whole of Priya Raman. She does not win by being clever at you. She wins by having already done the work you skipped. Somebody at the far end said something about the article, and how well it had read, and how the market likes continuity. Priya let him finish. A good piece about a man's wife is not a quarter, she said. I have sat in that room since I was 26 and I have never heard it go that quiet with everybody still breathing. Then propose something, I said. You've told us what's wrong. Tell us what you want. She had it ready. The venture stands on its own numbers by the end of the quarter or it closes at the end of the quarter. It does not come back to this table for a second look. No extension. The date doesn't move for anybody's diary. That's 10 weeks. 11. I checked. I could have fought it. I had the votes that morning, and I had them because of a photograph of a woman on a pavement telling the truth about a folding chair, which is precisely why I did not use them. A man who wins a vote on Monday because his wedding read well is a man who will lose the next one for the same reason. Agreed, I said. Say the rest of it. Agreed, and I don't move the date, and I don't come back into this room asking to. Priya wrote one word on her note and underlined it, and I would give a great deal to know what the word was. The interruption arrived through the glass, which is the trouble with glass. You get to watch your afternoon coming from a long way off. Leo was going down the corridor at a speed I had never seen from him, holding a canvas bag out in front of him like a man carrying something that has started to leak. Behind Leo, walking normally, in work trousers and a fleece, was my wife. The bag was open. It had been open for some time. Leo got the door about a quarter of the way and Otto went past his ankle, up the leg of the table and along the whole length of it at a steady trot, in front of 11 people who had come in to discuss capacity in the north. He stopped in front of Priya, took the cap off her pen, and sat down with it. Priya did not stop talking. She finished the sentence she was in, which was about depreciation, and then she looked at the animal on the table. Is this yours? It's my wife's. That is not an improvement. Somebody at the far end laughed. Then 2 more. Then the man who had said good morning twice put his head in his hands and made a sound I had not heard out of him in 9 years. That is how my board decided it liked my marriage. Not from the article. From a ferret and a pen cap. Wren came in and did not apologize, which surprised me until I understood she was working out the shortest route. She put 2 fingers on the table and made a small noise with her tongue, and Otto came back the length of it at a run and went up her sleeve. He's had the cap, she said to Priya. He brings things back. Usually inside a week. I have another pen. That isn't the point of the sentence. You're Mrs. Voss. I'm Wren. Priya Raman. I run this company's operations. I know. You're the one who didn't come on Saturday. I watched Priya decide whether that was an attack. It took about a second, and she got it right. I wasn't invited. I asked not to be, and I put it in writing. Then you're the only person connected to Saturday who hasn't told me it was lovely. Then my wife explained what she was doing in my building, which was not me. There's a cullet bin at the back of your works. I rang the plant on Sunday night and asked for 2 crates off the reject line. The man on the gate said yes, the man on the desk downstairs said no, and then somebody looked up my name and it all became complicated. You could have rung me. You'd have said yes. Is that the objection? You'd have said yes, and it would have turned up at the flat on a pallet with a note on it. I want 2 crates, I want to carry them, and I want the man on the gate to remember that I asked him and not you. I took her down myself. The reject line is at the back of the works, on the ground floor, directly under the room where the board was still sitting. There's a steel bin the size of a small car and it is full of glass that failed inspection. Edge chips, roll wave, the occasional panel that came out of the layer with a stress pattern you can see from the doorway. Wren went into it to the shoulder and started sorting and said nothing for 4 minutes. She held pieces up against the light in the doorway. She kept about 1 in 6. What are you looking for? Color, mostly. Your works runs a low iron for the architectural jobs, so your offcuts are nearly clear, and clear is expensive if you buy it and free if you're standing in it. And thickness. Anything over 10 millimeters, because I can grind that and it will hold heat. Priya came out through the fire door with her coat on and stopped, and I watched a woman who had been right about everything since 7 in the morning try to work out what she was looking at. You're taking that. 2 crates of it. That's waste. It's waste because of where it's standing. Priya walked over and looked into the bin. She did not touch anything. She has never in her life touched a thing she has not costed. Why is the edge like that? She was pointing at a panel with a bloom of fine cracks running back from one corner, and it was the first question I had ever heard her ask about an object instead of a number. That's the tongs. Or the tongs and a cold spot. Something gripped it while it was still moving and the rest of the sheet carried on. If it's every 5th panel it's the machine. If it's scattered it's an operator having a bad month. Which is it? Wren pulled 3 more out of different parts of the bin, laid them on the concrete in a row and turned 2 of them round. Machine. Same corner every time. Somebody has already told you and been ignored, because nobody raises a claim on glass that was going in a bin anyway. Priya looked at those 3 panels on the concrete for considerably longer than the answer required. Then she looked at me. Was that in the quality report? I don't know. No. You don't. She went back through the fire door without saying goodbye, because she never has. Pay a contractor to empty that bin, I said. I have signed the invoice every year for 12 years. I know. I've been buying it off him for 2. I stood in my own yard and did the arithmetic on that, and it did not improve. Somewhere in this city there is a man with a lorry who has been charging my company to remove glass and charging my wife to hand it back, and the only person in the transaction who was ever going to make something out of it was the one paying at the wrong end. We got the crates into a taxi. She paid for it in front of me. You're paying for the taxi. I'm taking the glass. The glass is free. The taxi isn't. Took the cap off Priya's pen, I said. He'll bring it back. She'll want a receipt. Then she gets one. In his name, not mine. It was the first joke the 2 of us made together and it was about paperwork, which probably tells you what sort of marriage we were building. Leo came down at 2 with the minutes. They want a dinner. Thursday. The board and the client. That was quick. It was quick because of the pen cap. Half of them think she's charming and the other half think she's an asset. He put the folder under his arm. You want to decide which half worries you more before Thursday. I had gone into that room to keep a deal alive, and I had kept it alive. I had also handed the closing of it to a calendar, in front of 11 people, on purpose, so that nobody could say afterwards that I had been forced into it. That was what winning looked like on the first Monday of my marriage. 11 weeks of borrowed time with somebody else's name on the loan, a wife in a taxi with 2 crates of my rubbish, and a dinner on Thursday where the whole room had been invited to look at her. He chose the dull thing, as promised. Gray, high at the neck, nothing anybody could have an opinion about. She put the carpenter's pencil in the pocket, which I decided not to mention. I did not brief her. I had learned that much in 5 days. What I did instead was worse, and it took me until the second course to understand why. If it gets bad, I said in the car, put your hand flat on the table and I'll end it. I can end a dinner in about 90 seconds. It's the one thing I'm genuinely good at. She looked out of the window for a while. No, she said. Why? Because I'd spend the whole evening deciding whether to use it. That's not a night out, that's an exam with a fire alarm in it. Restaurant was one of those rooms with a long table and a lot of brass where the acoustics are designed so that everybody can hear the person paying. Priya was already there and had already ordered, which is her way of telling a room she will not be waiting for it. Ingrid Halvorsen came with 2 of her people. Her firm hangs facades on other people's towers and buys about 1/5 of everything my works produces, and she had spent the last 4 months writing me polite letters about the Marchmont. And Douglas Pell came, because I had invited him 18 months ago and never rescinded it, and because Douglas Pell has never once declined a table where a decision might be made in front of him. Pell owns a fabrication business 2 hours north of us. He offered me pressed and toughened capacity before Roland Sterling did. I chose Sterling, and Pell has been extremely gracious about it ever since, at every opportunity, in public. He got to my wife between the bread and the first plate. And you make things, he said. Adrian mentioned. Glass, is it? Yes. Little pieces. Panels. What's the scale? Whatever fits the kiln I can get on the day. And what does a setup like that cost, in the end? A kiln, a unit, the rest of it. It's not nothing, is it? Half the table stopped chewing. He had not been rude. That is the thing about Douglas Pell. He never says anything you could repeat and have it sound bad. No, Wren said. It's not nothing. And Adrian's, he made a small open-handed gesture that did the sentence for him. He's paying for the kiln, she said. I asked him for it. Put my glass down and I was 2 words into something when her hand came down on my knee under the table and closed, hard, the way you take hold of a dog's collar. She was not looking at me. She was looking at Pell, and her face had not changed at all. I have been stopped by lawyers, by my mother, and once by a customs officer in Rotterdam. Nobody has ever stopped me faster. I sat there with my heart going and my mouth shut and my wife's hand on my knee, and I have never been more comprehensively told to sit down in my life. That's very direct, Pell said. It's a wage, she said. I'd have thought you'd approve. You've been asking about money for 4 minutes and you're the only one at the table who hasn't said what he wants out of the evening. Somebody down at the far end coughed into a napkin. Pell smiled and let it go, because he is not a fool, and turned the whole thing towards the room the way you turn a car in a narrow street. Well, he said. It has been a colorful fortnight for Voss Glass. Ingrid, are you any further on with the Marchmont? Since we are all being direct, it was beautifully done. He had lost 30 seconds and got the room to the one subject where my company was standing in a hole. Ingrid Halvorsen put down her fork. 11 panels, she said, to me, not to him. 11, in a building where I have hung 900. The building's owner is talking about impact. My installers are talking about the units. And your quality department has sent me a letter saying the glass left your works in specification. Did leave in specification, Priya said. I've read the file. I don't doubt you've read it, Priya. I doubt the file. When did they start? My wife had not said anything for 2 minutes. Halvorsen looked at her, then at me, and I watched a professional woman decide whether she was being handled. May, she said. The first one was in May. Which faces? I'm sorry, which elevations? Which sides of the building? Halvorsen thought about it. South. And the west return, I think. Yes, the west return. Did any of them start in the middle of the pane? The table went quiet in the particular way a table goes quiet when somebody asks a question that nobody at it has thought to ask. Don't know, Halvorsen said. You've got photographs. Of every one. Then you know. A stone or a ball or a man with a hammer starts in the middle and goes out from a point, and you can put your finger on where it began. Thermal breaks don't. They start at the edge, they run straight in at a right angle for about a hand's width, and then they turn. Halvorsen was already reaching for her phone. 2 of the board leaned towards her. Pell did not move at all, which is how I knew. He put the phone flat on the table and turned it round. The crack came off the edge of the pane, ran straight in, and curved away. That's not a stone, Wren said. That's the glass finishing something it started in your lair. Explain that, Priya said. Not warmly. She wanted it on the record. The center of a pane in the sun gets hot and wants to grow. The edge is under the frame, in shade, and it stays cold and doesn't. So the edge is pulled. Every pane in every building on Earth is doing that all summer, and almost none of them break, because the glass has enough left in it to take it. Yours didn't have enough left in it. Somebody brought that batch down through the annealing range too fast, so the stress that should have come out on the way down is still sitting in the glass, and the edge is where it sits. And you cut it and the edge got a bad heiress, and it stood there through a cold spring being perfectly fine, and the first hot week in May it spent what was left. Nobody said anything. A waiter came and looked at the table and went away again. That's a theory, Pell said. It's a description, Wren said. You can check every part of it before Monday and it doesn't cost anything. Go on, Priya said. Get the anneal charts for that run. Not the shift report, the actual trace off the layer. If somebody pushed the belt to catch up an order, it's in the trace and it can't be written out afterwards. Then look at where the 11 are. If they're scattered over 4 elevations, I'm wrong and it's installation. If they're all south and west and they all started at an edge, you have got one bad run of glass in one building and you know exactly which pallets it came off. Halvorsen said, and if she's right, Priya, that's yours, not mine. If she's right, it's ours, Priya said, and I would a great deal rather know in September than find out in court in 2 years. I'll have the trace tomorrow. And she looked down the table at my wife with an expression I have spent a long time trying to name and have got no closer than the look of somebody balancing a column that has been out by the same amount for months. Pell had one more go, because men like Pell always have one more. It's a lot of confidence, he said, for somebody who doesn't work in the industry. I've been putting glass in and out of a kiln for 6 years, Wren said. Everything I make is annealed by me, on a machine older than this restaurant, and when I rush it, it breaks, and then I write down what I did. I've got 4 years of that in a notebook. That isn't confidence. It's just the only mistake I've made often enough to recognize. Ingrid Halvorsen took a card out of her jacket and held it across the table. Have you got one of these? No. No, I didn't think so. Take mine, then, and make sure I hear from you. Not about the Marchmont. About what you make. My wife put a business card into a coat pocket that already had 3 pieces of broken glass in it, and I watched her do it, and I had to look at the far wall for a moment. The table changed after that, and it changed all the way, which I had not expected. It does not usually change all the way. The board wanted to know about kills. One of them wanted to know whether the same thing could be happening on 2 other jobs, which it might be. Halvorsen's secondman asked her something about edge work and got 20 minutes he had not budgeted for. She was good, and she was getting better, and at 9:20 she put her napkin on the table and said she was going to go. Found her outside on the step with her back against the brick, breathing like somebody who has carried something up 4 flights. Are you ill? No. Then what? She did not answer straight away, and when she did she was looking at the road. There were 14 people in that room and every one of them was looking at me. I've had 24 years of nobody looking at me. I'm not saying it like it's sad. I'm saying I've got no practice, and it uses everything I've got, and after about 2 hours I'm finished. You could have put your hand on the table. I wasn't in trouble. I was just done. Those are different things and you don't have a signal for the second one. I stood on the step with her. There was a taxi rank across the road and I did not call one. You cost me a claim in there, I said. I know. You could have said nothing. Halvorsen would have sued us in 2 years and I would have settled it and you would never have heard about it. Do you want me to be sorry? No, I said, and it came out with more in it than I intended. That's the trouble. I don't. She looked at me then. Whatever was on my face, she read some of it, and she did what she does, which is not to stand on the whole. Priya believed me, she said. That was the bit I wanted. Why Priya? Because she doesn't like you. If she'd agreed with me to be nice, it wouldn't have counted. Leo brought the car around. Before she got in, he said, that went extremely well, in the flat voice he uses when a thing has gone well and he is not sure it should have. He was right to use it. 2 of the board had already said the word we should to me on the way to the door. We should get her up to the northern people. We should have her at the Halvorsen Review. We should put her in front of the trade press. A woman had walked into that room as a story about my judgment and walked out of it as a line item. There'll be a photograph, Leo said. Ferris was outside for 10 minutes with the men from the paper. Somebody will run it tomorrow. I stood on the pavement and thought about who reads the trade press over breakfast, and about a man who has never in his life looked at his younger daughter and seen anything he could use. In the car she fell asleep against the window before we got across the river, with a business card in one pocket and broken glass in the other, and I sat next to her doing sums. 11 weeks on the venture. 51 weeks on the paper she had written in a store cupboard. Somewhere in that dinner, between the phone going flat on the table and the word heiress, the question I had been asking myself since Saturday had quietly changed into a different one, and the new one had a much worse answer. I no longer wanted the year to hold. I wanted her to stay. And the only thing keeping her in my flat was a document she could end at any time without notice, which she had written herself, on purpose, before she knew me. My mother-in-law rang me on Saturday morning. It was the first time she had ever rung me about anything. We'd like you both to come to dinner, Elaine said. Just the 4 of us. Roland would like to put things right, would he? He's seen the photograph. He's very proud. I let that sit in the air for a moment to see whether she would take it back. Elaine. He has been very proud since Thursday evening. On the night of the wedding he sent his daughter a numbered list asking her to come home and stop embarrassing the family. That's exactly the sort of thing that makes evenings difficult, she said, and I understood that I had just been told off. Wren read the invitation over my shoulder and said one word, which was Sunday, and then went and got her coat, which is how she agrees to things she has already decided to survive. I had one objective for that evening and it was politeness. Nothing else. Get in, be pleasant, be dull, be gone by 10. I have run harder negotiations against better people, and I have never once failed at being boring on purpose. The Sterling house is on a good road and has been in that family since Roland's father, and if you did not look carefully you would think nothing had happened to it. If you did look, there was a lighter rectangle on the wall of the hall where something had hung for a long time, and one car in a drive built for 3. Elaine had laid the table before we arrived. It was laid for 3, not out of malice. That is the part one have never been able to explain to anybody who did not see it. There was no cruelty in that room at all. There was simply a house in which the table gets laid for the people who sit at it, and my wife had never been one of them. She saw it the moment we came in, and she did not break stride. She went to the sideboard and took out a 4th setting in a chair from against the wall, the way you pick up your own coat, and I stopped her. I took the chair out of her hands and carried it to the table myself and put it down at the head end, next to mine, and said, "Elaine, we're 4. Elaine said, "Oh, of course, I'm so sorry," and went pink, and Roland came in and said something about the traffic, and the moment closed over like water. I was extremely pleased with myself. I want that on the record before the rest of it. Roland was charming for about 7 minutes, which is his limit. He asked me about the Marchmont. He asked me about the northern capacity. Then he turned to his younger daughter and paid her the first compliment of her life. "You did well on Thursday," he said. "I heard about it. Halvorson's people were talking about it on Friday morning. Came out of yourself. I always said you had it in you, you just never wanted it enough." He put his fork down. "Which is why I want to talk to you about your sister." Wren had not said anything since the hall. She does not talk in that house. I had noticed it on Thursday in a restaurant full of strangers and I understood it properly there, in the room she grew up in. "She's in the city," Roland said. "Since Tuesday. Staying with somebody, I don't know who. She won't take my calls and she won't take her mother's. She'll take yours." "She won't." "She will if you go. You go and you find her and you bring her home and we put this right." "Put what right?" "All of it." He said it gently, which was worse. "Adrian's been very decent about a bad situation and I'm grateful, and I've told people so. But we all know what Saturday was. There's a way to unwind these things quietly. There's always a way. And then Vivienne comes home and everybody has learned something. I have sat across tables from men who were trying to take 14 million from me and I have never wanted to leave a room faster." Elaine got up and began to clear. She took Wren's plate. Wren still had food on it, and she had eaten perhaps a third of it, and she put her fork down flat and let the plate go without a word. Watched that happen and something behind my ribs went cold and level. Elaine did not notice. Elaine has never noticed. That is the whole of her contribution to 24 years. "I've not finished," I said. Everybody looked at me. "Sorry. Wren hasn't finished." Elaine looked at the plate in her own hand as if it had arrived there from somewhere else, and put it back down. "It's habit," she said. "She always eats fast. She hasn't eaten anything." "Don't," Wren said quietly. It was the first word she had spoken at the table and it was addressed to me. Roland moved on, because Roland moves on. "There's the other matter as well," he said, "since we're all sitting down. There's the money." "Which money?" I said. "Her studies. 2 years of it. Fees, and the rent on that flat, and the equipment, which was not cheap and which she left behind when she changed her mind. You'll excuse me for raising it at the table, Adrian, but she doesn't answer letters either." "Roland," Elaine said. "Not tonight. Don't spoil the evening." There it was. Not stop, not that isn't true, not she doesn't owe you anything. Don't spoil the evening. In that house the crime is never the thing that is done. The crime is being the reason it got mentioned. "And there's the works building," Roland said. I did not know what that meant. My wife did. She had gone absolutely still, in a way I had seen once before, in a store cupboard with a folding chair in the door. "The old finishing shop on Bevan Street," Roland said to me. "Been empty 9 years. She used to say she'd have it. Kiln in the back, 3-phase already in, roof wants doing." Looked at his daughter. "You bring your sister home and sort this out, and it's yours. Keys in a week. We'd have to do it properly, but it's yours." Elaine's hand stopped on the serving spoon. It stopped for about a second and a half and then it carried on, and at the time I thought she was embarrassed by the vulgarity of it. I have thought about that second and a half a great many times since. I put my napkin on the table. I did not raise my voice. I have never once had to. No, I said. Adrian, let me do the whole thing, Roland, and then you can have the room back. Your daughter is not going to go and collect your other daughter. She's not a car. She doesn't fetch. Second. You are describing the ending of my marriage across a dinner table to my wife, in front of me, on the assumption that neither of us will name it. I'm naming it. Third, the money. She has one loan. It was in her name, it was from a bank, and it was cleared 8 days ago with a receipt in her name and not mine, because that was the arrangement and I keep arrangements. Everything else you have just listed is not a debt. There is no paper, there is no sum, and there never has been. It's a subject you raise when you want something. You have raised it twice this week. And the building. If that building was hers, it was hers 9 years ago and it has been standing empty ever since. You're not giving her anything. You're renting her something she was promised, and the rent is her sister. Roland had gone the color he goes. Elaine was looking at the tablecloth. And I sat back feeling, for about 4 seconds, like the best husband in the Northern Hemisphere. Then my wife stood up. I'm not going to look for her, Wren said. She was not talking to me. She had not looked at me once. I'm not going to ring her, and I'm not going to go round to wherever she's sleeping and tell her you'd like her back. If she wants me, she knows the number. She's had it since she was 10. Wren, I'm not finished. That's 3 things and I've said 1. Roland shut his mouth. I don't believe anyone had ever done that to him in that house. Second. I'm not coming here again. Not for birthdays. Not at Christmas. You can see me somewhere with other people in it, and I'll come, and I'll be perfectly civil, but I'm not sitting in this room anymore. And I don't answer the phone after 10 at night. Not to either of you. If it's an emergency, ring an ambulance, they're better at it. Elaine said, darling, you're being, and got no further, because Wren was already going round the end of the table. I'm sorry, Wren said, at the door, and I heard it and I hated it, and it was the last time in this story that she ever said it to them. Then she took her coat off the hook and left her parents' house before I had got out of the chair I had made such a point of carrying. I caught her at the car. She was standing with her hand on the roof, breathing the way she had on the restaurant step. We were most of the way across town before she said anything at all, and when she did, it was not about her father. Don't ever do that again. I had been rehearsing something generous about how well she had handled it. I had it more or less assembled. It went out of my head like water out of a sink. Do what? The chair. You didn't have a chair. I've never had a chair. I've been getting my own chair in that house since I was 9, and it's fine, and it's mine, and I know exactly where it lives. You took it out of my hands and you carried it in front of them and you announced it. And then my mother apologized to you. Not to me. To you. I made a point. You made me a point. There's a difference and you can't see it, and that's what frightens me. The lights changed and I did not move until the car behind us objected. Then the money, she said. You did that beautifully. You were right about every part of it, and there is not one sentence in there I could have said, because if I say it I'm ungrateful, and if you say it you're principled. It's not my fault. No. It isn't. It's just what happens when the person speaking is the person with the money, and it happens whether you want it to or not, and you have to know that it's happening. Wren, he was going to sit there and, I know what he was going to do. I have known what he was going to do since I was 11. I had 3 sentences ready before we came in, and by the time I got to say them you'd already said everything and I sounded like your echo. That landed exactly where she meant it to. What should I have done? She thought about it properly. She always does. It is one of the small terrible things about being married to her. Nothing, she said. Or asked. There was a whole minute before he said the word building. You could have looked at me. I have run this company for 4 years and I have never wanted so badly to explain myself. I got as far as opening my mouth. Then I thought about a napkin in a store cupboard, and the words even when it costs you something, and about the fact that the clause I had been so pleased with was the one about lying, and that there was apparently a second clause underneath it that neither of us had written down. All right, I said. That was all. It was the hardest sentence of the evening. She looked over at me for the first time since the hall. All right. All right. I heard it. You're not going to explain why you were right. I was right. It didn't help. Both of those are true and I only get to say one of them out loud. She turned back to the window, and after a while her hand came off her knee and rested on the seat between us, palm down, not reaching for anything. I did not touch it. It stayed there the rest of the way. At the flat she put the kettle on and got the notebook out and sat at the counter and started writing, and I looked over her shoulder because I have no manners. It was a list of what a finishing shop needs. 3-phase supply. A floor that will take 4 tons. Height for a hoist. Somewhere to put a bin that a lorry can reach. At the bottom she had written a date, underlined, in the carpenter's pencil. It was the date the laboratory had given her for the test panels, and the laboratory had told her twice that the date does not move. She had refused the only building she had ever been promised, at a table, in front of her mother, in the middle of a sentence about her sister. It took her about 9 seconds. I sat down opposite her with the list between us and understood 2 things at the same time. That I was married to somebody who could do that. That she was now going to have to build the whole of it herself, from nothing, on somebody else's calendar, and that the one thing I was actually good at was the one thing I was not allowed to do. The call came at 20 to 2 in the morning and I answered it the way you answer a phone at that hour, which is standing up before you are awake. It's me. Nothing's happened. Go back to sleep. You've rung me at 2. I know. I wanted you to hear it from me and not find the kitchen empty. That is clause 1 at 2 in the morning, from a woman with a kiln in front of her, and I have never been more thoroughly outmaneuvered by my own contract. I got dressed and drove to Halloran's, which turned out to be a unit on an industrial estate behind a tire place, with a roller door and a fluorescent tube that had been dying for years. She had the door up because of the heat and she was sitting on an upturned crate in front of the annealer with a torch in her hand, and she had been crying, and she was extremely annoyed that I could tell. It's the heat, she said. It's not the heat. It's partly the heat. 9 of the 17 panels had cracked coming down. She had them laid out on the bench in the order they came off, and the cracks were fine and clean and went from edge to edge like somebody had ruled them. For the laboratory. I know. They have to be there on Thursday morning by 9. I asked. Twice. It's a slot, there's a queue behind me, and if I miss it the next one is in February. I picked one up. It came apart in my hands into 2 pieces with a small sound and I stood there holding half a panel in each hand like a man who has broken something in a shop. Put it down, she said. That wasn't me. No. It was already gone. Put it down anyway. Here is what I could do about that situation. I could buy the laboratory. I could buy a laboratory. I could have 4 people in that unit by 7 in the morning and a new kiln by Wednesday and a man on a plane from Dusseldorf who would tell us all what had gone wrong. Every single one of those was the wrong thing and I knew it was the wrong thing, and I stood in a shed at 2:30 in the morning holding 2 halves of a panel, and I have honestly never felt more useless in my adult life. What do you need? I said, and I got it right by accident. 2 hands and no opinions. You've got those. She had a temperature. I noticed it when she went past me to the kiln and I felt the heat coming off her that was not coming off the kiln. She had been running a fever since Sunday and had told nobody, on the grounds that telling people is how a thing becomes a discussion. We reloaded through the small hours. She kept a running commentary, not for me, at a pitch and speed I had not heard from her before, and I understood that this is what she sounds like when she is not being watched. At about 4 she stopped in the middle of a sentence and put her hand flat on the bench. It's the pallets, she said. What? It's the pallets. Yours. I took 2 crates off your reject line and I didn't separate them. There were at least 3 runs in that bin and one of them is a different mix. I put money on it being the low iron, and it doesn't move at the same rate as the rest. Same shape, same thickness, looks identical, sitting next to each other in the kiln at 600 degrees expanding at 2 different speeds. So at about 400 on the way down, the join lets go. She wrote it in the notebook. Date, batch, what she had done, what she now believed, and what she was going to do differently, in about 4 lines. You're not upset. I'm furious. You're writing. That's what furious looks like when it's useful. 9 panels. 9 panels tells me something I didn't know on Monday. If they'd all come out perfect I'd have sold somebody a facade in 2 years that came apart in the first hot week. She closed the book. It's cheaper to find out in a shed. That was the first time in my life anybody had explained my own industry to me at 4 in the morning while running a fever. Thursday was the client. Not a client. The client. 2 years of work, and a man in Rotterdam who does not reschedule, and a signature that was worth more to us that quarter than anything else on the calendar. Wren was worse by Wednesday night. She got the second firing away and then sat down on the floor next to the kiln with her back against the wall and did not get up for a while. I rang Leo at 11:30 at night. Cancel Rotterdam. There was a pause of the length that costs money. Say that again slowly. Cancel it. Move it, kill it, do what you can. I'm driving to the laboratory in the morning. Is she in hospital? She's on a floor. Right. I heard him start typing. Then he stopped. Adrian, I'll do it and I'll do it properly and I'll take the noise for it. One thing first. Go on. I'm not telling them why, because it's nobody's business. But if your wife asks me what was in the diary on Thursday, I'm going to tell her. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you now so that you can't be surprised later. I don't lie to her. That's mine, not yours, and it isn't up for discussion. I said fine. I said it quickly, the way you agree to something you have not thought about, and I want that on the record as well. We left at 4:30 in the morning. The panels went in the back of my car on a shallow tray packed out with towels from my own bathroom, and the crates went on the seat, and Otto went in the footwell because leaving him was not an option we discussed. She slept for the first hour with her head against the door and her jacket over her like a blanket. I drove at a speed I have not driven at since I was 19 and I have never concentrated harder on anything. The laboratory is a low brick building on a business park with a reception desk and a woman behind it who has heard everything. I carried the tray in. I was in a suit, because I had not been to bed and the suit was what was on the chair. You'll want the goods door, she said. Round the side. There's a bell. Mind the step, it's not a step, it's a change of level and everybody goes over on it. Went round the side. I rang the bell. A technician in his 20s opened it, looked at the tray, and said, "Are you the courier?" I stopped, because there was no answer to that which was not ridiculous. Yes. Grand. Stand there, don't put it on the floor's cold and I don't want the shock. I stood in a corridor holding a tray for 11 minutes. Nobody asked my name. 2 people went past me and one of them said, "Sorry, mate." There is a photograph of my face in a trade magazine that month and not one person in that building had the faintest idea who I was, and I would like to record that it was the best 11 minutes I had had in about 6 years. Took the samples. Wren came in and did the paperwork in a voice like sandpaper and got the reference number and put the copy in her pocket with the glass, and then we sat in the car park in my car for a moment because neither of us was quite ready for the motorway. "That's it," she said. 8 weeks. 8 weeks for what? For a piece of paper that says what my glass does. Then I can put it in front of somebody who isn't married to me. She fell asleep before the second junction. We got back at 6:30 in the evening and she went straight to bed and I brought her something to eat and she ate about half of it and then she said, from under the covers, "Was Rotterdam today?" I could have said yes. I could have said a great many things. "It moved," I said. That is 4 syllables. It took me under a second. I did not agonize about it and I did not feel clever about it, and if you had stopped me in that doorway and asked me whether I was lying to my wife I would have told you I was letting her sleep. She was asleep before I got to the door. Leo came round the following evening with a box of things from the office and she asked him, in the kitchen, with the kettle on, in the flattest voice in the world, what did he cancel yesterday? And Leo, who had warned me in advance, on the phone, in a full sentence, said, "Rotterdam." I was 10 feet away with my coat half off. She did not shout. I have still never heard her shout. She thanked Leo, and let him leave, and put the mug down, and waited until the door was shut, which took about 40 seconds and felt considerably longer. "Do you know what I'm angry about?" she said. "Rotterdam." "No. I'd have told you to go and you'd have gone and I'd have driven myself and I'd have been fine and it would have been horrible and that would have been the end of it, isn't it?" She turned round. "You drove me. That's the nicest thing anybody has ever done for me and I am not going to pretend otherwise. And then you took the price of it off the table so I wouldn't have to look at it. You didn't want you to have to feel it. So you carried that on your own and handed me the version with nothing in it, and now I've found out from your assistant in my own kitchen, and it's smaller than it was, and it's your fault it's smaller. I know. Don't agree with me straight away, it's insulting. I'm not agreeing to end it. I'm agreeing because you're right. I put my coat on the back of the chair. Say what you want. If it costs you something, I want the invoice. That's all. Even when it's about me. She picked the mug back up. Especially when it's about me. I've spent my whole life being handed the version with nothing in it and being told it was a present. All right. Say it properly. If it costs me something, you get told. First. Before it's tidy. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded once and drank her tea and said, "Good. Now go and eat something, you look like a solicitor." That was the first night we sat on the same sofa. Nothing happened. She fell asleep at the far end with her feet under my leg because the flat was cold, and I sat there not moving for about 2 hours with a laptop I never opened. And at some point I realized that I was not performing anything and neither was she, and that it was the first hour of that marriage in which neither of us had been playing a part. I agreed to that rule and I meant it. I want to be precise about what I meant, because it mattered a fortnight later. I meant meetings. I meant flights and money and the things that cost me. It genuinely did not occur to me, sitting there with her feet under my leg, that I would one day be doing something that cost her instead, and that the rule would still apply, and that I would find that out far too late to be any use to either of us. On Saturday morning I came down at 10 to get the car, and there was a woman sitting on the steps of my building with a suitcase, and she stood up when she saw me. She had been there since 8, and she had nowhere to go, and she was my wife's sister. She had done her face on the steps. I worked that out later from the compact still open in the side pocket of the case, and it has stayed with me longer than most of what she said. Adrian. She stood up. Please don't say anything yet. Then don't sit on my steps for 2 hours. There's a cafe that costs £4 for a coffee. She said it lightly, as a joke, and then heard it land as information, and something went across her face and was put away. I had been braced for a great many versions of Vivienne Sterling and I had not prepared for the one where I could do the arithmetic on her in 9 seconds. What do you want? To talk to my sister. That's not an answer to the question I asked. No, she agreed. It isn't. And she picked up the case and stood there, and waited, because she has been getting into rooms since she was 15 and she has never once had to force a door. I want to be honest about the next part. I could have put her in a taxi. I had the means, the standing, and the excuse. I took her up because I have a rule about not making decisions on somebody's behalf, and I had been told about that rule twice in the past 10 days, and I was so pleased with how well I was learning it that I carried a suitcase into a lift for the woman who had walked out on me. Then opened the door and did not move. I have thought about that a great deal. She did not gasp, she did not step back and she did not step forward. She stood in her own doorway with her hand on the edge of it and she went white, and she stayed exactly where she was. Vivienne. Hello, Rennie. And then my wife started apologizing. Not for anything. That is what I could not get my head round at the time. She apologized for the flat being a mess, and it was not a mess. She apologized for not ringing. She apologized for the noise from the kitchen, which was a kettle. I'd have got a table somewhere, if I'd known you were. I didn't know where you were. Nobody did. I'd have come if you'd said, sorry this is your, and she gestured at the hall behind her, at the flat, at the whole arrangement, and got stuck. It's a bit odd, Vivienne said kindly. Isn't it? Nobody sat down, because there was nowhere on that landing to sit. There is a radiator that has never worked in the 4 years I have lived there and a window at the end that does not close properly. So we stood, in coats, in a draft, with a suitcase between us, and had the worst conversation of my life at a distance of about a meter, and twice during it the lift arrived with nobody in it and opened and shut again. At one point the woman from the flat below came up the stairs with shopping and said good afternoon to all three of us in the voice of a woman who intends to tell somebody about this. Vivienne did not come in. That is the part one noticed and did not understand until much later. She never once put a foot over the line. She stood on the landing side of the door for 40 minutes with her case beside her, and my wife stood on the other side of it, and neither of them said a single word about why. I did not invite her in. Wren did not step back. It was not discussed. There is a napkin somewhere in this building with a 4th clause on it and both of us were standing on it, and neither of us named it out loud, and I think that is the closest thing to a marriage vow either of us had managed by then. Where have you been? Wren said. About Vivienne. With Dorian, for a bit. Then not with Dorian. Then a friend's, and then a different friend's, and then a hotel, and then a cheaper hotel. She smiled. You don't want the tour. Does Mum know you're back? Mum knows. Dad rang me 9 times on Tuesday. You should go to them. I'd rather chew glass. She looked past her sister into the flat, at a hall she was seeing for the first time, and her chin went up about a centimeter. So this is where you live now? Yes. It's very gray. Yes. And then she said the thing. She said it warmly. That is the part one have never been able to explain to anybody. Well, Vivienne said. It's always been the way, hasn't it? You've always had my things, Rennie. My room, my bike, that awful green coat for 3 winters. It's practically a tradition by now. She laughed. She expected her sister to laugh. She was not being cruel. I would swear to that in front of anybody. She had said that sentence, or one like it, 1,000 times in that family, and every single time it had been funny, and every single time somebody in the room had let it be. Wren said, "I'm sorry." That was when I stopped being able to stand there. I went into the kitchen and got the bread and the cheese and what was left of a chicken and put it all on a plate and brought it out, and I did not think about it at all until I was doing it. I held the plate out over the doorway, and Vivienne looked at it, and I watched a woman who had been beautiful in the newspapers 3 weeks earlier work out whether she was going to take food off a plate on a landing. She took it. She ate standing up, quickly, with her back half turned, and it was the most humiliating thing I have ever done to another human being, and I did it out of pure kindness in front of 2 witnesses. I have apologized for many things in my life. I have never worked out how to apologize for that one. Then Otto came out. He came out low and fast through the gap between my wife's ankle and the door frame, which is the only route across that threshold anybody used all afternoon, went straight up the side of the suitcase, and took the earring out of Vivienne's ear. He did it in one movement. She said a word I will not repeat and put her hand to the side of her head, and Otto came back through the same gap with a small gold thing in his mouth and went under the sofa. Wren laughed. Not the way she laughed in the store cupboard, which was one syllable and gone before it finished. This one got away from her completely. She put the back of her wrist against her mouth and it kept coming, and she leant against the door frame, and there were tears in it, and she could not stop for about 15 seconds. Vivienne stood on the landing with one earring and a plate and watched her sister laugh at her, and I saw the exact moment she understood that whatever had been in that family had come loose. It's not funny. It is, though, Wren said. It's a bit funny. That's an antique. He'll bring it back. He brought Adrian's cufflink back in a day. She wiped her face with her sleeve. He kept a sock of mine for 8 months. Come back in March, Wren. I'm not going to say sorry again. Vivienne blinked. What? That's it. That's the thing. I've been standing here for half an hour apologizing and you haven't once asked me what for. You'd have found out by tomorrow anyway, so I'll tell you now. I'm not sorry about the flat. I'm not sorry I'm in it. I didn't take anything off you. You put your shoes under a mirror and walked out of a hotel in flats and left 'em and standing in a room, and I was the one still in the building. I know what happened. You weren't there. That's the whole of it. You weren't there and I was, and everything since has been people telling me I'm wearing your coat again. She was not shouting. Her hands were shaking and her voice was completely level, and I have never in my life been so frightened of anybody I loved. I'll see you somewhere with other people in it, Wren said. I said the same to Mum. It's not a punishment. It's just where I can do it. Then she went inside and left me holding the door. Vivienne put the plate down on the radiator that does not work, and picked up the case, and for about 4 seconds she was not performing anything, and she looked 28 and tired and entirely out of road. Go to your father, I said. He'll take you in tonight and he'll be unbearable about it, and it is still the correct move. Is that everything you've got? Yes. You could, I know what I could do. I'm not going to. Why not? And I gave her the honest answer, which was a mistake, though not the one that mattered. Because anything I hand you today, I'll be handing you every month for the rest of my life, and I'd be doing it to keep you off that landing. She thought about it. Then she said, You've got very hard, in a tone that was meant to wound and mostly sounded impressed, and went down the stairs rather than wait for the lift. Shut the door. Wren was in the kitchen with both hands flat on the counter. That was mine, she said. I know. The food wasn't. No. That was mine and I got it wrong. You didn't get it wrong. She was hungry. She looked up. It was the worst thing I've ever seen and you were right to do it and I'd like to never talk about it again. And here is where I made my decision, standing in a kitchen at 6 on a Saturday evening, and I made it privately, and I felt good about it. She had held that door herself for 40 minutes with a fever barely out of her and a laboratory slot in her pocket and a family she had just finished resigning from. She had done all of it without me. So I decided that the next round was mine. Whatever Vivienne did next, she would do it at me, and my wife would hear about it afterwards, tidied. I did not tell her I had decided that. It did not occur to me that it was a decision. Leo rang at 9:30 on Monday morning, and he did not say good morning. She's been to a paper. Which one? Not Ferris. Ferris turned her down on Sunday afternoon and rang me himself to say so, which I thought was decent of him. He went to the other one. It runs Wednesday. They've already been on to us for comment, and Adrian, he paused, and I heard him decide to say it, they're not asking about the wedding. They're asking about pressure. The piece ran on Wednesday under a photograph of Vivienne on a bench in a coat I recognized, looking off to the left, which is what they do when they want you sympathetic. It was not an attack. That is what made it work. There was not one sentence in it a lawyer could have got hold of. She had been under pressure from her family for a year. The engagement had been arranged in a room she was not in. She had left because she could not breathe. She wished everybody well, and then, 3/4 of the way down, in the middle of a paragraph about how quickly it had all been resolved, the sentence that cost me everything. Within the hour, the family had produced the younger sister. Produced. One word, no adjective, nothing you could sue. My wife, who had spent 24 years being the person who did not get a chair, described to the entire industry as something that was fetched. Read it 4 times standing in my kitchen at 6:10 in the morning while she was still asleep, and by the 4th time I had stopped thinking about my board. Priya came to my office at 9 and shut the door, which she does perhaps twice a year. "I'm going to say this once and then I'm going to go back to work," she said. "You're going to pay her." "I haven't said that. You've had that face on since Monday. You get it when you've already decided and you're waiting to find out how much. Say the rest of it. If you pay her, she stops being a problem and becomes a commitment. Problems end. Commitments renew. Every quarter for the rest of your life there will be a week where she is quiet and expensive, and you will call that week peace, and you will pay for it again. And I won't defend it. If it comes to that table, I will say I advised against it and that you did it anyway, and I will not soften it, because the day I start softening things for you is the day I'm no use to this company. That's fair. It isn't fair, it's just true." She put her hand on the door. "There's a version of this where you say nothing and let it be printed and it's a bad fortnight and then it's over. There's a sentence in it about my wife." Priya stopped with the door half open. "She is not a warm woman and she did not become one." "Yes," she said. "There is. That's the one that's going to cost you, and she'd tell you the same thing if you asked her, and you're not going to ask her." Then she went back to work. Leo drove me. He booked the table. He did both of those things properly and without comment, and then, at the lights on the bridge, he said his piece. "I'm not making up a reason for this afternoon. I haven't asked you to. You will, in about 4 hours, when you're in the car on the way back and it occurs to you that there's a gap in the day. So I'll tell you now what I'll say. If she asks me where you were, I'll say you had a personal meeting and that you should tell her yourself. That's it. I won't say more and I won't say less, and I won't say it unless she asks. That's not much of a rule. It's the only one that survives contact with you." He pulled up. "For what it's worth, and I know it's worth nothing, go home and tell her tonight. It'll be a horrible evening and then it'll be over and it'll never be able to happen to you again." I said I'd think about it. I did think about it. I thought about it for most of a minute. The cafe was near the station, because I did not want anywhere with a doorman, and Vivienne was already there with the case at her feet. She had been carrying that case for 12 days. She had done her face again. She had the coat from the photograph. And when I sat down she looked at me for a good 3 seconds in a way I had not been looked at since I was 22 and being assessed by my mother's finance director. It was not flirtation. I would almost have preferred flirtation. She was working out what I could take, in the way you work out what a room will fetch. I put the earring on the table between us before either of us spoke. She stared at it. "Where?" "Under my sofa. My wife got it out with a coat hanger and a torch and told me to give it back to you." "She told you to?" She said, "It's an antique, and she's got one ear." Vivienne picked it up and closed her hand round it and did not put it in her bag for the rest of the conversation, and I have never in my life watched a small gold object do so much damage. "Say what you want," I said. "Not going to name a figure." "You'd have it, that's what you do, everyone says that's what you do." She turned the earring over in her fingers. "I'll tell you what I need and you can do the arithmetic, since that's the other thing everyone says." And she told me. It took about 4 minutes and it was the most methodical thing I have ever heard from anybody in that family. A flat, not here. Somewhere she was not known, which meant somewhere with a name, which meant not cheap. A year up front, because nobody lets a flat to a woman with no employer and a suitcase. The deposit on top of that, because the deposit is separate and everybody forgets the deposit. Clothes, because everything she owned was in a case at her feet and half of it was for a honeymoon. Course she had wanted to do since she was 23, which she named, and which I had never heard of, and which was real. And then she stopped and said, "And enough left that I'm not counting it in the 3rd month," and I said, without thinking about it at all, 18 months of not panicking. Yes. Right. And I sat in a cafe near a station with my mouth suddenly dry, because I had said that sentence before. I had said it in a store cupboard, on my wedding day, to a woman on an upturned crate, about a kiln. I had thought at the time that I was being generous. Sitting there, I could hear exactly what it was. It is the sentence you use when you are pricing somebody's freedom and you would like the transaction to sound warm. Did the total out loud, because I always do, and because at that point I could not have stopped myself. The flat. The year. The deposit. The course, both terms. The clothes at a figure she did not argue with, and I suspect she should have. And 18 months. 140,000, I said. Vivienne laughed. It was the first honest sound she had made all afternoon. God, you're quick. It's not difficult. It's addition. You've no idea how long I've been trying to get somebody in my family to add it up. She wiped under her eye with one knuckle. Dad's never once got past the first item, and I laughed as well. I want to be exact about this because it is the worst thing in this story that I did with my face. We sat in that cafe and both of us laughed, for about 4 seconds, for entirely different reasons. She was laughing because after 28 years somebody had finally taken her seriously enough to total her up. I was laughing because the negotiation had gone well. I did it there. I am not going to pretend I went away and wrestled with it. There'll be an agreement, I said. 2 pages. A solicitor does it on Monday, and it protects you at least as much as it protects me. No. She said it without any heat at all, which is how that family says the things it has already finished thinking about. Agreement isn't a thing you do. It's a thing that sits in a drawer. Then let it sit in mine. It'll sit in yours and it'll sit in a file and it'll have a number on it. And she folded her hands and waited. I have never in my life had a negotiation end because the other side simply declined to have one. I want to be careful about the next part, because for 4 months I told myself she refused and I complied, and that is about a third of it. The rest is that 2 pages means a file. It means a reference, and a woman in my legal department who has worked for me for 9 years and would have asked me exactly one question about it, and a line in a schedule that goes to a committee in April. And it means a document about Vivienne Sterling existing in the world, in a drawer, in a building, in the same city as a person who reads everything on my counter standing up and squares the edges of it when she means to keep it. So I did not insist. I have insisted on paper against solicitors, against my own chairman, and once, for 2 days, against my mother. I gave it up inside a minute to a woman who had said no once, quietly, and then simply stopped negotiating. I took out my phone and I made the transfer at the table, from an account in my own name to an account in hers, with a reference, on a Wednesday afternoon. It took less time than the coffee. She watched me do it and did not look away once. What am I buying? I said. Nothing. That's the whole point of it. You're not buying anything, because if you were buying something I'd have to do something, and I've been doing things for people my entire life. Vivienne. You want the follow-up killed and you want me out of the city. I want the follow-up killed. I don't care where you live. That was a lie, and it was the small one, and I told it to a person I was in the middle of paying. There isn't going to be a follow-up, she said. There was never going to be a follow-up. He got what he wanted, they always do. And that was the moment, if I had been paying attention, when I should have understood that I had just handed £140,000 to somebody for stopping something that had already stopped. And then she put her cup down and handed me, for nothing, in a cafe by a station, the sentence that came back at me across a lit hall on the 9th of February with 200 people listening to it. You've just moved £140,000 off a telephone with nothing written down. It's cleaner. Adrian, you wouldn't lend me an umbrella without a schedule. I was going to marry you. I sat through 2 hours of what you're like about paper. She was not being clever at me. She was working, out loud, which is the one thing she and her sister do in exactly the same way and the only thing either of them ever got from their father. There's paper somewhere else, she said, and it's near enough to this that you'd rather the two weren't in the same building. I did not answer her, which she read correctly, and I changed the subject, which she read correctly as well. She put the earring in her bag then. Does she know you're here? No. Are you going to tell her? Yes. When? I did not have an answer. Vivienne watched me not have it, and something settled behind her eyes, and she picked up her cup. You know what the difference is between you and my father, she said. The amount. You went and got the number yourself. She did not leave the city. I found that out 8 days later. She took a flat about 1.5 miles from my building, which is not somewhere she was unknown, and she did not do the course that term, and she bought a coat. I have gone over what I could have said to her about that and there is nothing. It was her money. That was the entire structure of the thing. The moment it went across, I had no standing whatsoever, and she knew that before I did. What I bought was a week. That is the honest accounting. The follow-up did not run, because it was never going to run, and for 8 days nobody rang me about anything, and I mistook that for a result. Wren asked me on the Thursday what my week had been like. She was at the counter with the notebook and half a mug of tea, and she asked it the way you ask when you are mostly thinking about something else. I said it had been long. That was true. She said the laboratory had rung about a form. That was true as well. And there it was, a room with 2 people in it, one of whom knew something the other one did not, in a flat where the only rule anybody had ever written down was about exactly that. I broke clause 1 on a Wednesday afternoon at a cafe table, in under a minute, for the best reason I have ever had, and I did not notice I had done it until I was much too far in to go back and say so cheaply. There is a way you can tell that you have started keeping something. You find yourself being slightly more affectionate than the evening requires. Leo rang on the Friday. There's a man been ringing the office asking for you. Won't leave a number, won't take an appointment. Name: Dorian Fitch. I put my pen down. He's rung 4 times, Leo said. He says he doesn't want money and he doesn't want to be in the paper, and he'd rather not do it on the telephone, and he'll come to you. What does he want? He said, and I'm quoting, that he wants to give something back and then leave. He came to the works on Saturday evening in the rain, on foot, and stood at the gate until the men on the barrier rang up to say there was somebody asking for me by my first name. Went down. I had expected somebody I would dislike on sight, and I want to record that I have rarely been so comprehensively wrong about a person in a car park. Dorian Fitch is a thin man of about 30 in a black shirt with the cuffs turned back, and he was carrying a guitar case because he had come straight from one thing and was going straight to another. I'm on at 9, he said. That's not me being rude, it's just the shape of the evening. This'll take about 10 minutes. Do you want to come inside? No. If I sit down it becomes a conversation. So we stood under the canopy by the goods store with the rain coming off the edge of it, and he put the case flat against his leg, and he gave me the morning of my wedding the way a contractor gives you a report on a job he was not paid enough for. Right. She came to mine at 7:10. I know that because I was asleep and the buzzer's loud and I looked at the clock. No coat. She'd come across town in what she stood up in and she'd been walking, because her shoes were wrecked. She wasn't crying. Everybody assumes she was crying. She was extremely calm and she talked for about 40 minutes without stopping, and I made 2 cups of tea and she didn't drink either of them. Mr. Fitch, Dorian's fine, and you'll want the rest before you ask anything, because the order matters. He was right. It did. She'd been up since about 5. There was a man at the house. Not a friend of theirs, a man her father owed money to, and it wasn't the first visit, because she said her mother didn't come down, and her mother always comes down. She was on the stairs. Not listening on purpose, she'd gone down for water. And her father was explaining to this man why he should wait, and the argument he used was the wedding. The rain came off the canopy in a line and neither of us moved. He said the wedding closed it. He said the arrangement was in place and the money was effectively already in the building. Dorian shifted the case to his other side. And he gave him a figure. A figure for what? For her. That's what she heard. She was on the stairs at 5 in the morning and she heard her father tell a stranger what his daughter was worth as a way of getting a fortnight. I said nothing at all. He took that for disbelief, which it was not. He didn't run off with me, he said. I'd like that written on something. She came to mine because it was the only address in this city that wasn't hers or her mother's or a hotel her father could ring. She stayed 4 nights. It was not a romance, it was a floor, and by the 2nd night we both knew it, and by the 4th she'd gone to a friend's. And I've been the musician she ran off with ever since. I've had 2 functions cancelled and a man at a wedding fair asked me if I was going to behave myself. Then why are you here? And he gave me the only answer I have ever fully believed on first hearing, because I'd like to put it down. I've been carrying it about since August and it isn't mine and I want it out of the van. That's it. There's no more to me than that. You could go to a paper. I could. And then I'm in it forever. Every time somebody's version changes, they ring the man who was there. I'd be answering the phone about this family when I'm 50. I'm not going to argue my way out of a story. Arguing keeps you in it. I'm going to leave. He checked his watch, and apologized for checking it, and checked it again about 90 seconds later. There's a residency going in another city and I've said yes. I go the week after next. Do you need money for that? It was the wrong question and I knew it as it came out. No. He was not offended. He had clearly expected it and had the answer ready in the same flat voice. If I take money off you, I'm attached to you. Then it's a transaction and transactions have a second installment. I'll pay for my own van. One condition and then I'll go. Go on. This doesn't go out through you. Not to a paper, not to the family, not in a room where somebody can say Dorian Fitch told him. The second my name's on it, I'm back in, and it'll follow me to the new place, and the whole point of the new place is that nobody there has heard of any of you. Can know it. You can do what you like with knowing it. But if it comes out of one of them, and not because I put it in your hands. I want to be precise about the next 10 seconds, because everything after this is standing on them. I could have refused. He would have told me anyway, I think. He had already told me the substance and he was not a man who would have taken it back. But he was buying his own exit with it, and I have exactly one thing I have never gone back on in my adult life, and it is not a large thing, and it is the only one I have. You have my word, I said. Right. He picked up the case. That's that, then. For what it's worth, I said, I don't think you did anything. No, he agreed. But you're the only person in this city who said so, and you were the groom. And that's a very odd afternoon for both of us. Got about 6 steps into the rain and I asked the question I had been holding since the middle of it. The figure. Did she say what it was? He turned round and told me. Then he said good night, and went off towards the road with his collar up, and I stood under that canopy in a yard I owned for a considerable length of time. Because it was £140,000. I had arrived at that number myself, from first principles, in a cafe by a station, on a Wednesday afternoon, out of a flat and a deposit and a course and 18 months of not panicking. Her father had got to the same number from a debt and a stranger on the stairs. 2 men, working independently, from completely different directions, had priced the same woman and come out level. I have been told my whole life that I have a gift for valuation. I stood in the rain and understood exactly what I have a gift for. She got in at 8 with her hair wet and a bag of chips, and she was in a strange mood, and she put the chips on the counter and did not open them. My father came to the unit. Today. 3:30. He was in the car park when I came out for the skip. He'd been there a while, because the windows had gone. She got 2 plates out, which is what she does with her hands when the rest of her is somewhere else. He was nice. That's the first thing. He was really nice for about 4 minutes, and he asked about the laboratory, and he knew the word annealing, which he's never once used at me in 24 years. And then he wanted to know what Voss glass is doing about the northern capacity. I put my glass down, not in those words. He talked round it for a bit. Whether the venture was going ahead. Whether the board had a date on it. Whether you'd been told to close it or whether you were choosing. Wren. I know. What did you say? I said I don't sit in your meetings. She was arranging chips on a plate very carefully and not eating any of them. Which is true. And then he said the other thing. He said the building's mine. Not for finding Vivienne, that's finished, he's not asking that any more. Just mine. He said it like it had been agreed years ago and he was tidying up the paperwork. You said. I asked him what it was worth. She looked up. That's what you'd have done. And he told you. He told me straight away. He's never told me a number in his life and he had that one ready before I asked. He said, about 140, and then he said the part I've been sitting in the car about. I said that's not what it's worth, it's a shell with a bad roof. And he said, it's what it's worth to me. Not this year it isn't, he said. Not this year. I have had a good deal of practice at keeping my face still. I have done it in rooms where a great deal more than this was on the table. I did not manage it. She saw something and she stopped with a chip halfway to the plate. What? Nothing. That isn't nothing. You've gone the color of the wall. It's a lot of money for a building with a bad roof. Adrian. And I stood in my kitchen with my wife in front of me and both of my silences in my hands, and I could tell the difference between them, and I want credit for nothing except that I could tell the difference. One of them was a promise I had made 2 hours earlier to a man who was buying his way out of my family with it. The other one was a transfer I had made on a Wednesday because I could not bear a word in a newspaper. Only one of them was mine to give away. So I gave that one, in the worst and most partial way there is, and it was still the first honest thing I had done in 9 days. There is something I know, I said. I found it out this evening. It's about your sister in the morning of the wedding, and it explains all of it, and it is not mine to tell you." She went completely still. "Explains what?" "Why she went." "You know why she went?" "Since about 6:30 tonight, yes." "And you're not going to say?" "Gave somebody my word 2 hours ago. He wasn't protecting your family and he wasn't protecting me. He was buying the right to leave this city without being in the story, and it was the only thing he asked for." "Who?" "I can't." "Adrian, is it? Ask me a question I can answer." She stood there with 2 plates of chips going cold in front of her, and I watched her run every possible response and discard them. "Can I get it from anywhere?" "Yes." "One place." "Your sister." That was the worst sentence in the evening. I watched it land and I did not soften it, and softening it was the entire content of my character up to that fortnight. "Right," she said. "You can be angry." "I'm not angry. I'm working out whether I believe you, which is different, and you should let me do it." She sat down on the stool and put her hands flat on the counter. "Here's what I've got," she said eventually. "You could have said nothing. I'd never have known there was anything to know. Nobody would ever have found out that you found out." "Yes. And you told me the shape of it and not the inside. That's the maximum honest thing available to you." "I know it is, because I've been sitting here for a minute trying to find a better version and there isn't one." "So?" She picked up a cold chip and ate it. "I hate it." "And you did it right." "Both. I have been congratulated in rooms with a great deal of glass in them for things that were worth considerably more than this, and none of them ever landed anywhere near as hard because I had just been told that I was honest, in my own kitchen, by my own wife, about the cheaper of the 2 things I was not saying." "I'll have to answer him," she said. "Dad. He wants a yes or a no by the end of next week, and if I say nothing he'll take it as negotiating." "What are you going to say?" "I don't know yet. He's offering me the only thing I've ever wanted for a piece of information I haven't got." She turned the plate round on the counter. "That's the bit he'll never understand. If I knew what your board was going to do, I might be sitting here working out what it was worth. He didn't offer me a bribe. He offered me a test, and he doesn't know he did." The question I had been carrying since the wedding was whether the arrangement would hold to the end of the quarter. I lay awake that night with the answer to it, and it was no longer the question. What I did not see for another 4 months is that 2 of those 3 numbers were never valuations at all. A man who owes one sum stops having prices. He has the sum, and after that everything he owns is either enough to clear it or not enough, and a shell with a bad roof is worth what it would settle. And so is an elder daughter on a staircase at 5 in the morning, and both of them come out at the same figure because there is only one figure left in the house. That is why he had it ready. He had not been asked for a price. He had been asked for the only number he had. And I got to it from the other end, out of a flat and a deposit and a course and 18 months of not panicking, and came out level with him, and nobody made me do that. Father had put a figure on one daughter to buy a fortnight, and I had put the identical figure on the other one to buy a week. And there was a napkin in a nest somewhere under my own kitchen with 5 clauses on it in builder's pencil, and I finally understood whose handwriting it was in. The question now was whether you are allowed to choose somebody you have already bought, and what the answer to that costs, and which of us was going to pay it. He did not ring her. He rang her mother, and her mother rang, and that is a machine which has been running in that family since before I was in it. "Your father's very low." "Mum. He hasn't been sleeping. He's got a lot on and he's not as young as he thinks he is, and it would take you 20 minutes. 3 times in 4 days. And on the Wednesday he simply went and stood in the car park at Halloran's from 4:30 until she came out, because he has always known that she will not walk past a person who is waiting. She could have rung me. I have thought about that a great deal and I have never once been able to hold it against her, because I know exactly why she did not. She did not want to be a thing that had to be handled. She had watched me handle a table full of her family 6 weeks earlier and had spent the drive home explaining what it cost her, and she was not going to hand me a second one. So she went out to the car park on her own, in a fleece, with her hands in her pockets and about 11 grams of broken glass in the left one, to finish it herself. I have the whole of it because she gave me the whole of it, that evening, before I asked, which is the only reason this story goes the way it goes. He started gently. He always starts gently now, and it is worse than the shouting, because the shouting was at least a thing you could see coming. "Your mother's worried about you." "She's not." "She is." "She doesn't say it." "No," Wren said. "She doesn't." "In the building." He had brought the deeds, or something that looked like the deeds, in a plastic wallet on the passenger seat, and he tapped the wallet twice while he talked, which she said was the part that made her want to be sick. 9 years that roof's been letting in. It's yours. It's been yours since you were 14, I've said so in front of your mother. You've never said it in front of Mum. Then I'm saying it now. He is very good at this. I have negotiated against him. I'm not asking you to spy on your husband. I'd never ask that. I'm asking whether a man in my position ought to be spending money on a line in the spring. I don't know what the board's doing. You'll know what he's like of an evening. That isn't information, Ben. He let it sit. I've got 40 people. Some of them have been with me since your grandfather. I've got a men doing my dyes who I've had to ask twice to wait. If there's no line in the spring, I need to know now, because now I can do something about it, and in March I can only do it to people. And that is the thing about Roland Sterling that nobody outside the family ever gets to see. Every word of that was true. He meant all of it. He would still have sold either daughter for a fortnight. She had, by her own account, decided about 4 minutes earlier that she was going to say nothing and walk away, and she had got as far as taking her hand out of her pocket to say goodbye. There isn't going to be a line in the spring, she said. Stop spending it. She heard it land while it was still leaving her mouth. She said the tone of his voice changed before she had finished the second sentence, and that she watched him and stopped being sad in real time. Say that again. And she stopped. Mid-word, she said. She got about half of a syllable out and closed her mouth. I've said what I'm going to say. Wren. Has he told you something? No. Then how do you? Because he counts out loud. That was the second one, and it was worse than the first, and she knew it as she said it, and she said it anyway because he had asked her a direct question and she does not lie. He counts out loud in the kitchen. He's been doing it since October. I'm not deaf and I'm not stupid and I live there. Roland put both hands on the roof of the car and stood there. Then he said, right, in a completely different register, and got in, and did not offer her the wallet, and did not say goodbye either. Leo was parked at the far end. He had come to drop a package at the unit because I had asked him to, and he had been sitting there for 6 or 7 minutes with a Sterling car in his mirror. He got out when Roland had gone and walked over and did not pretend he had seen nothing. That was your father? Yes. You all right? No. He put the package on the wall. I'm not going to tell him, he said. That's not me being loyal to you, it's me being clear about the job. I don't report on his wife, that isn't what I'm for, but you'll tell him what you saw if he asks. He won't ask. He doesn't know to. Leo picked up his keys. So here's the arrangement. You've got until tomorrow evening. If you haven't told him by then, I will. That isn't your business. No. It's the second time in 6 weeks I've stood in a car park deciding whether to be somebody's discretion, and I've had enough of it. I told him the same thing about you and he didn't much like it either. She got home at 8. I was on the phone to Rotterdam. She waited in the doorway of my own study until I had finished, which she had never done before, and she was still wearing the fleece. I need to tell you something and I need to do it before you ask me anything, because if you ask first it turns into an answer and I want it to be a report. Put the phone down on the desk. My father was at the unit. I went out and talked to him on my own and I've made a mess of it. Then she went and got the notebook. I want to describe this properly, because it is the single most characteristic thing my wife has ever done and it is also, without any question, the moment I fell the rest of the way. She did not cry and she did not apologize. She opened the book at the current page, which is the page where the cracked batches go, and she had already written it up. She had written it up in the car park, sitting in a taxi, before she came home. 38, she read. What went? A conversation with Roland Sterling, in the car park at Halloran's, about 20 minutes. Cause. I let it run too long before I said anything, then I tried to bring it down in one move. Same as the 17. You can't take the last part fast, it's always the last part. What actually came off? 2 sentences. 1, there's no line in the spring. 2, that you count out loud in the kitchen. The second one's worse than the first. My share of it. She stopped and looked up. 2/3. 2/3. It's 2/3. He set it up, so he's got a third. But I went out there on my own when I didn't have to, and I stayed after I'd decided to go, and I answered a direct question when I could have said I'm not answering that. That's mine. Next time. Don't go alone. Say the no at the start, not at the end. Assume he is recording it, because from now on I'm going to. Then she closed the book and stood there in a fleece with a notebook against her chest and said, that's everything. I don't have a version where I come out of it better. I have sat in rooms where people have brought me disasters. I have run a company for 4 years. Nobody has ever once come into a room and handed me their own failure in the same handwriting they use for the kiln. Leo said he'd tell me if you didn't. I know. He told me he'd told you the same thing about something else. She put the book down. Which I've thought about, and I'm not asking. Ask. No. If you want to tell me, you'll tell me. That's the whole of Clause 1, and it only works if I don't stand over it. There is a particular kind of quiet you get when somebody has just made your life very much harder by being extremely fair to you. Because here is what had happened in my kitchen in the space of 6 minutes. She had made a mistake, gone out to the car park to fix it herself, failed, come home, written it down, read it out, priced her own share of it at 2/3 and put a procedure at the bottom. And I had made a transfer of £140,000 to her sister 3 weeks earlier and had said nothing about it on 19 separate evenings. Her error was going to cost us the spring. Mine was going to cost considerably more, and the difference between us was not the size of the number. It was that hers was on a page with a date on it. You've gone quiet, she said. I'm counting. Out loud, apparently, if my father's anything to go by. And she laughed at her own joke, tiredly, at the counter, and I laughed as well, and I have thought since that if there was one evening in the whole of that autumn when I could have said it and survived, it was that one. What happens now, she said. Now your father knows there's no line in the spring, a fortnight before my board formally knows it. Is that bad for you? It's not information he can use against the company. He can't short us on a rumor, he hasn't the appetite or the broker. I was so pleased with that answer. I gave it in the tone of a man closing a file. So what does he do with it? And I said, nothing. He protects himself. He'll cut costs, he'll let people go early, he'll be unpleasant to your mother about it for a month. Every part of that was reasonable. It was the correct read on every version of Roland Sterling I had ever met. What I had not allowed for, and what I still had no way of allowing for, was that a man who has spent his whole life certain that other people are working to a plan does not hear no line in the spring as bad news about his own company. He hears it as the first piece of somebody else's plan, and he has 4 weeks before anyone else has it, and he had already begun deciding what the rest of the plan must be. Vivienne went to the house on the Sunday and did not leave for 11 hours. I have 3 accounts of that day and they agree on almost nothing except the length. She arrived at 11 in the morning. She was still there at 10 at night. Nobody in that family has ever been able to tell me what was actually said. What I know is that Elaine rang her younger daughter 4 times between 2 and 6, and that on the 4th one Wren picked up. Come and talk to her. No. Wren, she's on the stairs, she's been on the stairs for 2 hours and she won't move and your father has gone out to the car. Then you talk to her. I can't do anything with her. I know. Nobody ever could. That's not new information and it isn't mine to fix. You're being very hard. I'm being somewhere else. There's a difference and I'm not going to argue about it on a Sunday. She put the phone face down on the counter and went back to the bench and did not do any useful work for the rest of the evening, which I noticed and did not mention. At about 10:30 her mother sent a single message. It said, sorted, don't worry, love Mum. Wren drove to Bevan Street on the Tuesday because she had decided to go and measure the place properly. Not because it was hers. Because it was the only building of that shape she had ever been inside, and she wanted the dimensions to argue with. She rang me from the pavement. There was a skip outside. That was the first thing. A yellow skip on the curb with a board frontage, half full. And in it, on its side, with one leg broken off and its door hanging open, was a kiln. It was a small old top-loader, brick-lined, the size of a chest freezer, and it had belonged to her grandmother, who had made buttons and small pressed things in the back of that building in the 1950s, and who had taught a 7-year-old what a cone was. That kiln is the entire reason my wife does what she does. It has been in the back of that building for as long as anybody in that family has been alive. Somebody had put it in a skip in order to tidy up. The door of the shop was open. Vivienne was inside with a man from a letting agency and a tape measure, in the good coat, and she had a set of keys on a ring in her hand and she was swinging them. Wren. God, isn't it filthy? She was completely delighted. That is what I have never been able to get anybody to understand about that woman. She was not gloating. She was pleased, and she wanted her sister to be pleased with her. Mum's given it me. She's put it in writing and everything. It's going to be a studio, I'm going to let the front out and do the back, it's got such good light. It's Mum's. It's Granny's, and then Mum's. Dad never had anything to do with it, he just talks about it. She laughed. He's furious. And there it was. The whole architecture of that family in one sentence in an empty shop. That building had never been Roland's to promise. Elaine had owned it outright for 20 years. Every time he had dangled it at his younger daughter across a table, his wife had been sitting there knowing she could have handed the keys over on any morning of any of those years and had chosen not to. And on the 11th hour of a Sunday, with one daughter screaming on the stairs and the other one somewhere else being difficult, she had finally worked out what it was for. Wren did not say any of that. She asked one question. Who put the kiln out? The clearance men. It's scrap, Rennie, it's got a leg off. It's got a leg off because it's got 4 and 1's gone. You can't want it. No, Wren said. I can't. And she went into the back where the crates were, because the building had been full of somebody else's broken glass for 9 years, and she picked up one wooden crate of it, and carried it out past her sister and the men with the tape measure, and put it in the boot of the car. One crate. She left the rest. She did not touch the skip. Wren, don't be like that. Come and see the light in the back, and my wife said, it's good light. You'll like it, and got in the car. She was completely level on the phone. That was the frightening part. She gave me the address of a skip, the state of a kiln and the wording of a letting agent's board in about 90 seconds. Where are you now? Sitting in the car at the end of the road. Stay there. I'll come. Don't. Wren. I'm serious. If you come now, the first thing you'll do is get your phone out. I had, in fact, already opened the valuation. I had it on the screen. That building, that street, that condition, 9 years empty, and I know 4 people who could have had the whole thing bought and in her name before Friday, and I would not have had to move anything about to do it. I can buy it, I said. I know you can. That's what I'm ringing to stop. It's a building with a roof and a 3-phase supply, and it's the one you were promised. It's the one I was promised by a man who never owned it, and now it belongs to my sister, and if it belongs to me by Friday it'll be because my husband bought it off my mother. And every time I stand in it for the rest of my life, that's what it is. That's what the walls will be. That's not, Adrian. I know what you think this is. You think there's a version of this where I own the building and it's fine and I'm just being proud about it. There isn't, and I've had one afternoon and you've had 90 seconds, so let me have this one. It was, I am now certain, the wrong call. It cost her the best part of a year, and it cost her a winter working in conditions I could not look at directly. And I sat in a glass office with the valuation open on the screen and closed it, and said, all right. What do you want to do? I want a shed, she said. There's a shed. Shed is on a yard off the eastern bypass between a tire remolder and a man who repairs horse boxes, and it is not a shed, it is half of a Nissan-type unit with a roll door and a partition down the middle. It has a floor that will take the weight, which is the only thing on her list it does have. It has 1 phase for everything, 1 tap, no heating, and a roof that produces its own weather. The rent is a quarter of what a proper unit costs, and she paid the first year out of the workshop money in one go so that nobody could ever put it up. The move was on a Saturday, and it was, without any competition, the worst organized operation I have ever taken part in. Her kiln, the new one, the one she had bought in October with her wage, the one thing in that shed that was hers outright, weighs rather more than the van we hired to move it. We discovered that at 9 in the morning on a wet forecourt, with Leo, who had turned up in a coat he had never worn before and had not been asked. Doesn't weigh more than the van. It weighs more than the van will carry, which is the number that matters, Leo said, reading the plate on the door. Who hired this? I did. Right. Well, I'm going to hire a different one, because I would like all of us to be alive at lunch, and because I have discovered a thing about myself this morning, which is that I would rather be here than at home. It took the whole day and most of it was in the rain. The neighbor with the horse boxes came out twice to watch, and the second time he brought a bar and stayed 4 hours and would not take anything for it. The tireman told her, with total sincerity, that she was mad, and then asked whether she could do a sign for the front of his place, which is the first order she ever took in that yard, and she did it for the cost of the glass. Otto traveled in a carrier wedged between the kiln crate and a box of tools and was the only individual on the premises that day who was entirely content. By 7 in the evening there was a kiln bolted down, a bench, a rack, 1 working socket and a crate of Bevan Street glass in the corner that she did not unpack for 4 months. Priya came the following Thursday. She did not ring first. She turned up at the yard at 4 in the afternoon in the shoes she wears to a board meeting, and stood in 6 inches of standing water outside a Nissan hut on the eastern bypass, and did not remark on it. Anil Trace had come back. It said exactly what my wife had said it would say over a table full of glass of wine, and there is a man at my works who no longer runs that line. Priya did not say thank you. She did not say sorry, and she did not say anything at all about a wedding, or a marriage, or a shed. "I've read your laboratory results," she said. "You've got a compatibility problem." I had one. "You've got one. You're feeding off mixed post-industrial cullet with no certificate. That'll test beautifully once and then you'll be quoting on a job in 2 years with a pallet from somewhere else. I separate by run now. Everything in here is logged to the pallet it came off and I fire a test button off every pallet before I load a batch. Show me." And my wife took the notebook off the bench and gave it to the chief operating officer of Voss Glass, who read 3 pages of it standing in a puddle, and then went back and read one of them again. "This is the 17th, Priya said. 9 cracked." "Yes. You've written your own share as 2/3. That one's all mine. The 2/3 is a different entry." "I see." She gave the book back. "Your handwriting's appalling and your method is better than my quality department's." Then she looked round that shed for about 4 seconds, 1 phase, 1 tap, a bucket under the worst of the roof, and she said the only personal sentence I have ever heard her say. "This is a stupid place to do this." "Yes," Wren said. "It's what there is." "Mem," said Priya, and went back to her car, and rang me from it to complain about something else entirely, and did not mention any of it. So that was the winter. My wife went to a shed on the bypass at 7 every morning and came back at 8 at night with her hands cut, and I closed a quarter, and we had dinner most evenings, and we were extremely happy in a way I have never managed to describe to anybody since. I am going to try to describe it, because I have had 9 years to work out why I never could, and the answer is that not one part of it will hold still long enough to be a story. The flat stopped being gray in about a fortnight and neither of us decided that it would. A kettle got used twice a day. There were 2 mugs on the drainer instead of none, and then 4, because she broke one and replaced it with 2 from the place by the yard that sells them to builders by the dozen. There is a ring of grit on that console table from the first afternoon and there is a second one about 4 inches from it, and I have moved house since, and I did not have the table cleaned before it went, and I have never mentioned that to her. She put things down. That is the whole of it. I had lived in that flat for 5 years and had never once put anything down in it, and within days there was a torch on the windowsill, a coil of wire on the arm of a chair, and a pair of boots by the door that were permanently damp. On the second Sunday I drove out to Halloran's at 7 in the morning, which was not discussed beforehand and was not remarked on afterwards. I stood in the doorway until the man who runs it looked up and said, "You after somebody?" I said I was with Wren, and he put a brush in my hand and pointed at the far end, and I swept a floor for 2 hours in a coat that cost more than his kiln. Nobody asked me a single question about myself. About 9 somebody sent me out for tea for 4, and I got the order wrong, and was told so at length by a man of about 60 with a rolled cigarette behind his ear. I have run a company since I was 26 and I have been in a room with 2 ministers. I would put those 2 hours in the first 5 mornings of my life. I went back the Sunday after, and on the third one Halloran called me by my first name and asked me to hold a door. She tried to teach me to read a break. She did it properly, with samples laid out along the counter, and she was patient about it in a way I have never been patient about anything. Start at the edge and find where it began. There'll be a mark. It's small and it looks like nothing. I can't see it. You can. You're looking for the answer. Look for the mark. There is no mark. There's always a mark. Wren. There is no mark. There was a mark. It took her a second and a half to put her thumbnail on it, and I looked at where her thumbnail was and still could not see it, and she looked back at me with an expression of total and genuine bewilderment. It is the only occasion in 9 years on which I have been the more mysterious of the 2 of us. I am still bad at it. I can find it now on a clean break about 2 times in 3, and she has never once let me claim the third. We had one real argument that winter and it was about a bin. The shed had flooded, so a plastic crate of cullet came into the flat and went in the corner of the room I do not use, and then there were 2, and then there were 4. I said something about it on a Tuesday, in the voice I use for things that are not really a question. She heard the voice before she heard the sentence. She put the 4th crate down on top of the 3rd one and said, "Say it as a request and I'll do it tonight." It's 4 crates of broken glass in a room nobody goes into. I know exactly what it is. Say it as a request. So I said it as a request, and she moved them that evening, and she has done that to me perhaps 40 times since, and I have never yet got it right first time. And I counted. I counted out loud in that kitchen most nights, because that is what my working sounds like, and at some point that autumn she stopped waiting for me to finish and started answering. I would be halfway through a run of figures and she would say a number back at me, or, far more often, that one's wrong, and she would be right, because she has spent her entire life listening carefully in rooms where nobody was speaking to her. I did not think about it once. It was the least remarkable thing that happened in that flat all winter, and it is the only one of them I would take back. It is also the reason my wife was standing in a car park in November with the whole of my spring in her mouth, and I have never held it against her for a minute, and she has never once stopped holding it against herself. Underneath all of it, in my own house, at my own table, across 4 months, there was a transfer I had made on a Wednesday afternoon and had still not mentioned, sitting there being older every single day. By the second week of December we were talking to each other in slots. I want to be exact about how ridiculous this had become, because I did not notice it happening and it took a man on a salary to point it out. She was at the shed from 7. I was in the office from 7. She had a batch running most nights and could not leave it in the last 4 hours of a cool. So we had breakfast at 6:30, which was 2 questions and a piece of toast, and we had a telephone call at 9 in the evening which was 15 minutes and which I had, God help me, put in the calendar as a recurring item so that nothing else could take it. It was called 15 minutes. Daily. Leo could see it. Everybody who booked my diary could see it. You've got your wife on a repeat, Leo said, in the middle of something else entirely. Yes. In a slot. It protects it. Right, he said, and wrote nothing down, which should have told me everything. I was closing a quarter. The venture had 8 working days left to stand on its own numbers and it was not going to, and I knew it was not going to by about the 10th of the month. I was still going through the file every night looking for a version of the arithmetic in which I had not been wrong in front of 11 people. I slept about 4 hours a night for 16 days. I was extremely efficient and completely useless, which is a state I recognize now and did not recognize then. On the Friday Leo put a car outside at 4 in the afternoon and told me there was a site issue at Ardley. Ardley is my mother's house. It is 2 hours out, it has been shut up since she died, and the company has kept it on for reasons that are entirely to do with me not having dealt with it. What site issue? Water. In December? In December especially. Wren was already in the car. She had a bag. She looked at me through the window with an expression of complete innocence that would not have fooled a child. Told me the roof had gone, she said, as we came off the ring road. He said you needed somebody there who could look at a building. He told me it was water. Adrian, when did Leo Marchetti last drive anybody anywhere on a Friday? The house was warm. That was the first thing. Somebody had put the heating on the day before. There was a fire laid. There was food in the fridge for 2 days, and it was good food, and none of it needed doing anything complicated to. There was wine on the side, which is not a thing that had been in that house since my mother, and there was a note on the kitchen table on a compliment slip from the office, which I have kept. It said, "The doors are locked and the system will release them at 7 tomorrow. This is not a malfunction. My phone is off until Sunday evening. There is soup. If you want to sack me, I'd rather you did it on Monday when you have slept, because on Monday you will not want to." I read it twice. Then I went and tried the front door, which is a thing I am not proud of. It took me about 20 minutes to establish the shape of what he had done, which I record here as the only professional compliment I can pay him. He had put the house on a hold from the panel, which he could do, because he holds the account. He had rung the monitoring company on Wednesday and given them a standing instruction that there were to be no call-outs to Ardley before Sunday morning, and they had logged it, because he is the authorized person on that account and has been for 3 years. He had done it in his own name, on his own initiative, on a Wednesday, and had then gone about his week as though nothing were happening. Got the monitoring company on the phone and a very pleasant woman told me she was terribly sorry but the instruction was in place and could only be lifted by the account contact. I'm the owner. You are, Mr. Voss, and the account contact is Mr. Marchetti. Can I speak to a manager? You can, and she'll tell you the same thing, because that's the arrangement your office asked us to put on this property in the summer, and it was a very sensible arrangement and we were pleased to see it. I stood in my dead mother's kitchen with my phone in my hand and my own delegation policy pointed directly at my head, and behind me my wife was laughing so hard she had to put a hand on the table. He's very good, she said. He's fired. He's not fired. No, I said. He's not fired. I made 3 more calls. I would like that known. I tried the estate manager, I tried a locksmith who does not work on Fridays, and I tried, at one point, to remember whether the windows in the boot room had ever been alarmed. At about 6:30 I sat down at the kitchen table and stopped. That's it. That's it. There's nothing left to try that isn't stupid. How does it feel? Like the first hour off in 4 months. There you go, then. We ate the soup. We drank most of the wine. She had put a fleece on over the good jumper because the far end of the kitchen has never been warm, and she sat with her feet on the rail of the chair and asked me about the house, and I told her, and then I told her the rest of it. I have never talked about my mother to anybody. Not to a girlfriend, not to Priya, who worked for her, and not to the man who has managed my life for 4 years. She built it, I said. That's the thing everyone knows. 2 furnaces and 11 people when my father left, and a name that meant nothing, and she made it what it is, and she did it in a trade where nobody wanted her in the room. So you're not allowed to have a complaint. There isn't one to have. She was extraordinary. That's not what I asked you. She was turning the glass on the table. I asked what she was like. And I heard, from a distance, the exact sound of somebody who is about to say something they have not said. When I closed the Kessler contract I was 26. It was the biggest thing anybody in that company had done in a decade, and I did it on my own, and I sat on it for 2 days because I wanted to tell her properly. And she read the summary and she put it down and she said, "Good. Next. That's it. That's it. That's the whole of it." And she wasn't being cruel and she wasn't withholding. That's what I need you to understand. That was warm. For her that was warm. Every single thing I have ever done, she looked at the result. I turned the glass round. She never once looked past it. And I've built a life that runs on exactly the same principle, and I'm extremely good at it, and I did not choose it. The office, Wren said. With the glass. What about it? Everybody says it so she could see the whole company. She was watching me. Was it? Or was it so she never had to be in the room? And I sat in that kitchen with my mouth open like a fool, because I have quoted that decision in interviews. I have called it the most quoted decision she ever made. I say it about twice a year. Both, I said, eventually. It was both. She'd have said the first one and meant the second. Did she ever ask you a question and then stand there and wait for the answer? I did not have to think about it, which is the worst part. No, I said. Wren nodded slowly and did not offer me anything. She did not say that's awful, or I'm sorry, or she must have loved you really. She has never once in her life reached for the thing you are supposed to say. She said, right. That's 2 of us, then. And then, after a moment, mine did it the other way round. Yours looked at what you'd done and never at you. Mine looked at me every day for 24 years and never once at what I'd done. Which is worse? Neither. They're the same one. Somebody decides which bit of you is the useful bit, and that's the bit that gets a chair. Fire had got down to the point where somebody has to decide whether to put another log on it. May I kiss you? I said. She put the glass down. You've had 2/3 of a bottle. I have had exactly the same amount as you, and I'd have asked you in a car park in September. That's not the wine. That's the timetable. Say it again without the sentence about the car park. May I kiss you? Yes, Wren said. And then we're going to have a conversation you're not going to enjoy, and I'd like it in that order, because I'm not brave enough for the other way round. I have been asked since, more than once, in the way people do, what it was like, and I have never given anybody an answer. What I will say is that she had one hand in the front of my shirt in exactly the way she had held the strap of that canvas bag on a staircase in September, which is how she holds on to something when she has decided not to let go of it. And that at some point the log did not get put on the fire and the room got cold and neither of us did anything about it for quite a long time. Then she sat back down at the other end of the table, which I noticed. Right, she said. The paper. Wren, let me get through it. I've had it assembled since about 9:30 last Tuesday, and if you interrupt me I'll lose the middle of it. There is a contract. It says a year. It says 11 or 12 appearances, it says money for a workshop, it says I can walk out on any day without notice, and it says you don't lie to me. And I have been living inside it since September and I have not once wanted to change a word of it until about 4 minutes ago. So change it. No. She said it exactly the way she said it in the store cupboard, fully assembled, sitting there long before I walked in. Here's why. If we tear it up tonight, then everything that happens after tonight happened because 2 tired people got locked in a house by an assistant and drank a bottle of wine. It's not what happened. I know that. I'm not talking about what I know. I'm talking about what I'll be able to prove to myself at 4 a.m. in about a year's time. I've spent my entire life being told what I felt by people who were sure. My father was sure. My sister was sure. I'm not doing it to myself as well. So we run the year. She put both hands flat on the table. All of it. To the date on the paper. The money stays a wage, because if it stops being a wage the day I kiss you then it was never a wage, and then everything I said in that cupboard was rubbish. And then on the day it ends, there's nothing owing in either direction, and if you still want to be in a room with me you can come and say so, and I'll be able to believe you. That's 10 months. It's 9 and a bit. Wren, I know what it is. Her voice did the thing it does about twice a year, which is go slightly out of true. I know exactly what it is. I've been costing it for a week. I want the version I can trust more than I want the version that's comfortable, and I want you to say yes now, quickly, before I find out how much I mind. So I said yes. We stayed at that table for another 2 hours, and it was, on any measure I have, the best evening of my life, and about 1:30 in the morning I very nearly ruined it, which I have since decided was the right instinct, arriving 11 weeks late. She had gone quiet, and I had my hand on the back of her neck, and I said, "There's something I have to tell you." She waited. She did not ask. She has never once asked. That is the whole of her, and it is also, it turns out, the exact conditions in which a man like me does nothing. Because I stood there in a warm kitchen at 1:30 in the morning and I did the sum. If I say it now, this evening becomes the evening she found out. 9 months of a year we have just agreed to run properly, and the first night of it is this. The quarter closes on the 20th. And after the 20th I will have 3 clear days and a completely empty diary, and I can sit down with her at that table with nothing else in the room, and do it properly, and give it the time it deserves. That is what went through my head. I want it written down exactly as it was, because I have never been able to soften it since. I did not decide to keep it from my wife. I scheduled it. I put a confession in a slot, the same way I had put her in a slot, the same way I have put every difficult thing in my life into a slot since I was 22 and learned it off a woman who thought glass walls were a management philosophy. "What is it?" she said. "I'd have got here a lot faster if somebody hadn't had to lock the doors." She laughed, and put her head against my shoulder, and I held on to my wife in my mother's kitchen and felt like the luckiest man in England. Leo turned his phone on at 8 on Sunday evening. He answered on the second ring and said, "Am I employed?" "You're employed." "Right." A pause. "I'd like to say I did it for you, and I didn't. I did it because I have a life and I would like to keep it, and I could not go into January with you like that. I know. Also I'd like Thursdays." "Done." He rang back 4 minutes later, and his voice had changed completely. "Priya's called a meeting for 8 tomorrow morning. She's got the quarter numbers. She's booked the room until 11 and she's asked for the venture file and the boards on the list. That's a day early." "Yes," Leo said. "It is." Priya put the file down at 4 minutes past 8 and said, "It has met none of them. Not one condition. Not the order book, not the underwriting, not the tooling. Sterling Fabrication had failed every test the board had set in September, and it had failed the last of them in the second week of December, and the date did not move for anybody's diary because I had stood up 11 weeks earlier and made sure of it myself." "There's a vote at 11, she said. "You wanted the room until 11. "I want it from 11. "I'd like 3 hours. "For what?" "To do this in the right order." I got up and left my own board meeting at 20 past 8 in the morning and drove to a Nissan hut on the eastern bypass. It was raining and there was a lorry from the remolder blocking the yard, so I walked the last part, in the shoes, through the standing water, and I did not care about that at all, which was new. She had the door up and was doing something with a grinder, and when she saw me at 9:30 on a Monday she turned it off and put it down and said, "Who's dead?" "Nobody's dead. I've got a board vote at 11 and I'm going to close the joint venture." She stood there with her goggles pushed up on her head and a mark across her face where they had been. "Right," she said. Then, after a moment, "Why are you here?" "Because when the board closes it, your father's company goes." "Not eventually." "Within about 6 weeks, and probably before the end of January." "I know what it does." "I know you know. I'm not here to explain it to you." I took my coat off, because I was going to be there a while and it was easier than holding it. "I'm here because I am not going to do it at 11 and come home at 7 and tell you over dinner." He looked at me for a long moment. "You've never done that before," she said. "No. You've done the other one. In September you drove me to a laboratory and told me a meeting moved." "Yes." "So this is the thing you said in the kitchen." "This is the thing I said in the kitchen." She wiped her hands and sat down on the crate she uses for a chair, and said, "Then tell me all of it and do it in the order you'd tell Priya." So I did. It took 11 minutes. The order book, the letters of intent, the tooling supplier who had now not been paid since March of the previous year, the underwriting that no bank would write, and what carrying it for another 6 months would cost, which was a number I said out loud twice because she asked me to. What happens if you don't close it? We carry it. It's survivable. It costs us the spring and it costs us the northern capacity for 2 more years, and it costs Priya, because she'd go, and she'd be right too. And every person in that room knows I proposed it. If I keep it open for 6 more months, it isn't a business decision anymore, it's a man protecting his own judgment with company money. That's the honest version. That's the honest version. Good, Wren said. Because I was going to say it, and I'd rather you said it. She picked up a piece of glass off the bench and turned it over, which is what she does with her hands. Right. Now the other thing. You're not doing this to my father. I'm aware of that. No, you're not. Not properly. You think you are. Say it, then. You've been in here 9 minutes and you've told me the numbers 3 times and you haven't once said the word Dad. You are being extremely careful, and careful is what you do when you've decided you're the one holding the knife. You're not. It's a bad company, and it's been a bad company since before you met any of us, and he ran it into the ground on his own with nobody's help. He'll say I did it. He will. He'll say it for 20 years. That's not the same as it being true, and you don't get to buy peace by carrying a loss. I said, it would be very easy for me to keep it open. And she said, I know. That's why I want you to hear this bit properly. She put the glass down. I am not going to be the reason a company carries a loss. Not yours. If you keep that thing alive because you're married to me, then everything anyone has ever said about this marriage is right, and I'd rather be the woman who was fetched from a store cupboard than that. That is not a small thing to say. No. It took me about 4 minutes and I'd like to not do it again. Then she said the sentence that I have thought about more than anything else in that whole year. Neither of us can do this on our own. You can't close it without doing it to me, and I can't tell you to close it without doing it to him. So we do it together and we both say it out loud, and then it's ours. Say it, then. Close it. Close it, I said. And that was the first thing in 11 weeks of marriage that neither one of us could have done alone, and it took place in a shed with 1 phase and a bucket under the roof, and it cost her a family firm and me the only thing I have ever proposed to a board that had my name on it. Roland rang at 10:10. He had heard. I have never established from whom, and I have stopped wanting to know. He begged for 4 minutes and threatened for 2 and did not appear to notice the join. Adrian. 6 weeks. That's all it is. I've got a man in Hull who'll take the whole toughening line if I can hold on past February. Roland, 40 people. Some of them were with my father. There's a lad on the packing floor whose mother, and he told me about the lad on the packing floor, and it was true, and he had probably never spoken to him. Then it turned. It turned in the middle of a sentence, the way weather does. And I'll tell you what this looks like from where I'm standing. You marry my daughter in October. You put her in front of the press. She's in my car park in November telling me there's no line in the spring, which she'd have got from you. He didn't get it from me. And in December you close it. That's not a business decision, son, that's a route. You've had 4 months inside this family and you've come out the other side with my capacity and my daughter, and I've got to skip. You've got to skip because you put your mother-in-law's kiln in it. I should not have said that. It is the only thing I said in that entire conversation that I regret, and I regret it because it was satisfying. You'll hear from people, he said. I'm not finished. The vote was at 11. It took 9 minutes. Priya presented it and did not decorate it. Then she stopped, and looked down the table, and said, the proposal came from the chair. The chair should speak first. I have thought about that since as well. She did not have to do that. She could have had it carried without me saying a word and I would have had to sit there. I proposed this venture in June against the advice of the chief operating officer, I said. She was right about the order book, she was right about the tooling, and she was right in the meeting where I told the board she was being sentimental about capital, which was a cheap thing to say, and I withdraw it. I'm voting to close it. I'd rather be the man who was wrong in June than the man who is still wrong in April. 11 votes to close. Mine was the first one counted, because they go round the table from the chair, and I have been in that room since I was 26 and it is the only time I have ever voted against my own paper. Roland was in the corridor. I do not know who let him up. Somebody on the ground floor knew the name and thought he was a supplier, which he was, right up until 11:20 in the morning. He was standing outside the glass, on the visitor's side, in a suit he had owned a long time, and he had watched the whole thing through the wall without hearing one word of it, which is what that wall is for. He did not shout. I would have preferred it if he had shouted. He looked at me through the glass and I watched him work out that it had already happened, and then I watched him do the thing I had seen him do in a hotel suite in October, which is stop being furious and start being arithmetic. It took about 2 seconds. It is still the fastest thing I have ever seen him do. Then he nodded at me, once, almost politely, and went to the lift. I should have been frightened by that. I was not. I stood in a corridor and felt the enormous flat relief of a bad thing that is finally over. Priya caught me at the top of the stairs. She had her coat and she was going somewhere else and she did not slow down much. That was correct, she said. I know. No, you don't, you think it was necessary. It was correct. Those are different and I've been waiting 4 years to say one of them to you. She got 2 steps down and stopped. For what it's worth, I'd have carried the loss. You'd have what? If you'd asked me to keep it open for 6 months because of your wife's father, I would have argued for an hour and then I'd have found a way to do it. I'd have hated it, and it would have been the beginning of the end of this company. She put her gloves on. You didn't ask. That's what I'm saying. Elaine rang the shed that evening. Not me. Not her husband's solicitor. The shed. Wren told me about it while she was eating standing up, which she does when she is thinking about something. My mother rang. What did she want? That's the thing. She didn't want anything. She was very light about it. She asked how I was, which took about 20 seconds, and then she asked me a question about you. What question? She asked whether Voss Glass shares go down when a company closes something. I put my fork down. What did you say? I said I don't know anything about shares and she should ask somebody who does. And she said, no, of course, I was only wondering, and then she talked about the weather for 4 minutes and rang off. Your mother has never asked a question about money in her life. No, Wren said. She hasn't. We sat with that for a moment and then we let it go, because it was late, and because the enormous flat relief was still on me, and because neither of us could think of a single thing a 57-year-old woman in a house on a good road could possibly do with the answer. The thing nobody warns you about is that when the reason goes, it goes all at once and it does not take the arrangement with it. The venture closed on a Monday. By the Wednesday the trade press had run 400 words about a disciplined decision, the shares moved up rather less than 0.1%, and my board wrote me a note about judgment which I read twice and put in a drawer. Now on the Thursday morning I sat in a car outside a shed on the Eastern Bypass and understood that the entire purpose of my marriage had been discontinued by 11 votes and that nobody had thought to mention it to the woman inside. There was no Monday left to buy. There had not been one since December. She was living in my flat, at my expense, on a piece of paper that had been drawn up to protect a board meeting that had now happened. Leo told me about Vivienne on the same day, which is the part one have never been able to arrange in my own head into any order that lets me off. The foundation office has had 2 calls, he said. A Miss Sterling. She's asked about tickets for the 9th, twice, and the second time she asked whether there was a family allocation. There's a table for the family. There's always been a table for the family. It's your mother's foundation. He looked at his notes for slightly longer than he needed to. She's local. The number she left is a landline about 1.5 miles from your building. So there it was. £140,000, paid in November so that a woman could start again in another city, and she was living 20 minutes walk away, ringing my mother's foundation about a table. I had told myself in a cafe that I was buying a follow-up that was never going to run. What I had actually bought was a season ticket, and Priya had said so to my face in December, standing at my door with her hand on the handle. I want that fact placed exactly where it belongs. I found out that Vivienne had not gone on the Thursday morning. I wrote the cancellation of the agreement on the Thursday evening. I looked for the napkin first. I gave it about an hour, which is longer than I have ever given anything I did not expect to find. I took the plinth off the base of the kitchen units, which is a thing I had never done in 5 years of living there and which produced a quantity of material I am not going to describe. I found the cap of a pen that I am fairly confident belongs to the chief operating officer of Voss Glass. I found a hair clip, a euro, a foil seal off a bottle, and a small brass washer. I did not find a linen-look napkin with 5 clauses on it in builder's pencil. Otto watched me do the entire thing from the arm of the sofa with the expression of a creature who has never once been prosecuted. So I wrote it out on a plain sheet of paper at the kitchen counter, in ink, and I have a copy of it and I am going to set down what it said, because everything that happened afterwards happened underneath it. The agreement made in a service corridor on the 11th of October was ended that evening. Not suspended. Ended. No date, no notice, no penalty, nothing owing in either direction. That there would be no public appearances. Not 11, not 12, not 1. That anything she attended from that evening onwards she attended because she had decided to. That the flat was hers for as long as she wanted it and that this was not conditional on anything whatsoever, including on her being in it with me. That the workshop money was hers, as it had been since the third clause, and that I had that morning made it survive me, which took a solicitor 40 minutes and cost me nothing at all. That the loans were not mentioned, because there was nothing to mention. That transfer had gone out from the back of a car in October, in the first week, exactly as I had said in the store cupboard, with a receipt in her name. And then the one I was proudest of, which I put in because I had spent 4 months watching a company decide it liked my wife and I could see precisely where that road went. That I removed myself, in writing, from any decision made by Voss Glass concerning her work. My opinion was not to be sought, offered, or recorded in any procurement discussion involving her. That if that company ever bought a panel from her it would be because somebody who did not answer to me had wanted it. I copied that clause to Priya. She replied in 9 minutes, at 11:30 at night, and the reply said, "Noted and welcome. It changes nothing, I was never going to ask you." And then the last item. There was one clause I did not cancel. I left the first one standing. Not to lie to her, including by leaving things out, even when it cost me something. I left it in force indefinitely, binding on me only, ending never. I want to be honest about why I did that, because there are 2 reasons and only one of them is decent. The decent one is that it was the only clause that had ever mattered and I wanted her to have it for the rest of her life whether she was in the flat or not. The other one is that a man who leaves a rule in place has done something about it. She read it at the counter, standing up, the way she reads everything. It took her about 4 minutes and she did not say a word until she reached the end. Then she put it down and squared the edges of it against the counter with both hands, which is what she does with anything she is going to keep. "You've done this 10 days before the 9th. Yes. You need a wife at that dinner. It's your mother's foundation and the whole room will be looking for one. I know. You've just taken away every reason I've got to be standing next to you." "Yes." "Why tonight?" "Because I found out something this morning that made it obvious I should have done it in November." And she went very still, and she asked the question, and she asked it straight, the way she asks everything. "Is there something now that you're not telling me?" Do not lie about anything that can be checked. That is the only rule I had before I met her and it is the reason that whole year happened at all, and it has never once been convenient. "Yes," I said. She did not move. "It's about your sister. It isn't the thing I promised somebody in a car park in November, that one's still his and I still can't. This one's mine. It's something I did. And you're not going to tell me tonight?" "No." "When?" And I heard myself say it. "After the 9th." There it was. The second one. In the kitchen at Ardley in the middle of December I had put it after the 20th, and the 20th had come and gone, and now it was after the 9th, and I said it in the same voice a man uses to move a meeting. She heard it. I know she heard it, because of what she said next. "You've cancelled 4 things I could have lived with," she said, "and kept the one thing I can't." "Wren, no, let me get it right, because I'm only going to say it once and then I'm going to be quiet about it for a fortnight and that's going to be very hard." She turned the sheet of paper round on the counter so it faced me. "That's the only clause on there. It's the one you wrote in tonight, on purpose, when you didn't have to, and it's the one you're not keeping. You've handed me a rule and told me in the same conversation that you're breaking it. I'm going to tell you. I believe you. That isn't the problem." She pushed the paper an inch further towards me. "I'm not going to ask you again. If I ask you, it becomes mine. It becomes a thing I'm doing to you. And then when you finally say it you'll be saying it because I made you, and I'll never know which it was. So I'm going to wait." She looked up. "You know what waiting is. It's the only thing in my life I've ever been genuinely good at. 24 years of practice. It's the worst thing you could possibly have handed me and you've just done it in writing." I had come into the kitchen to take a price off a person. I had done it, properly, at real cost, and I had meant every line. I had walked out of it having removed her obligation and kept my own silence, which meant that from that evening the silence did not cost me once. It cost me every single day, in a flat, at a counter, with a woman standing 4 feet away being scrupulously fair to me. "You're free," I said. "From this minute. There's nothing on you." "I know." I read it. "Then I'm going to bed, because I haven't got the right to stand here waiting to hear what you're going to do about it." That is the only genuinely correct thing I did that night and I want it counted, because it is more or less the last one for a fortnight. She did not answer. She stayed at the counter with the paper and the tea, and she did not follow me, and she did not say good night. I lay in a dark room in a flat with 2 people in it, both of whom were now declining to say something, and understood that I had finally succeeded in making my marriage completely equal. She was still there in the morning. She was still there the morning after that. She did not raise it once, exactly as she had said she would not, and she was warm and ordinary and entirely herself, and it was the worst fortnight of my life. Leo rang on the Monday about the guest list. I'm doing the placement for the 9th. The foundation has sent me their draft and I'm sending it back. Why? They've got her down as Mrs. Adrian Voss, spouse. He let that sit. I'm not putting that in front of her. It's a guest list, Leo. It's a list of who everybody in that room is. She'll read it on the table, because there's one on every table, and she'll read her own line, and it'll say spouse. So what are you putting? I'm putting her name, he said. Just the name. And when the committee gives her the panel, which they will by Wednesday because Priya has been extremely tiresome about it for a month, I'm going to put the panel next to it. I sat back in the chair. Say that again. The center panel. The one that's meant to go on the wall behind the lectern. The committee's been arguing about the commission since November, and Priya sent them the laboratory results and told them to stop being stupid. My wife, no. Not yet. A pause. I'd like it on the record that I didn't put that in front of them either. I've been extremely careful to have nothing to do with it, and if you want to know why, it's because I read what you sent Priya on Thursday night and I thought it was the first sensible thing you've done since October. The letter came to the shed, because that is the address the laboratory had, and she read it standing in the doorway with the roll door half up and rang me before she had got to the end of it. Did you do this? No. Hello. No. Adrian. No. Ask me again and I'll still say no, and then go and look at the sheet of paper on the counter. There was a pause while a woman on a bypass in January went and did exactly that. I could hear her breathing and the tire remolder going in the background, and then I heard the paper. That my opinion is not to be sought, offered, or recorded in any procurement discussion involving her. Yes. You wrote that a fortnight ago. I wrote it before I knew there was a commission. Ring Priya. She'll be unbearable about it, which is how you'll know. She rang Priya. Priya was unbearable about it. She said, and I have this verbatim because it was repeated to me twice that evening with enormous satisfaction, that the committee had been going round in circles since November, that she had sent them the laboratory results without comment, and that she had told them she was not going to sit through another meeting about a wall. So my wife got the center panel of the Ilse Voss Foundation winter evening on the strength of a set of test results and a chief operating officer's patience, and I had nothing whatever to do with it, and it is the only thing in this entire story that I am unambiguously glad about. The committee meeting was on the Tuesday and I was not at it, which turned out to matter. There were 4 of them and they were pleasant and they had a running order, and about 10 minutes in, a woman with a folder explained how they saw the evening going. There would be a moment, she said, after the speeches, where the panel was lit. And it would be lovely, she said, if Mrs. Voss could be standing by it. Just stand there and smile. 2 minutes. It's such a good story. Which story? Well, and the woman with the folder did the gesture. Everybody in that year did the same gesture at some point, and not one of them ever finished the sentence. Wren said, I'd like to check I've understood. You're commissioning a panel or you're commissioning a photograph? It's both, really. No. It's one or the other and I need to know which, because I've got 4 weeks and the 2 jobs are different. I have this from a member of that committee who has since become a friend and who describes it as the most uncomfortable and most enjoyable 40 minutes she has spent in a decade. Because my wife then put her folder on the table and offered to withdraw. Not as a threat. She said it the way she says everything, flat, with the numbers ready. She said she would take the commission off them that afternoon, with apologies and no fee, and that they had time to go to somebody else, and that she would give them 2 names of people who were better at pressed work than she was. And then she said what she wanted instead, and it was one thing. My name on the card. Not the Voss part. Wren Sterling. That's the name that's on the laboratory results and it's the name on the notebook and it's the name of the person who made it. There was a certain amount of silence. That's it. That's it. You can photograph the panel as much as you like. I'd rather not be in front of it, but if it's a condition I'll stand there for 2 minutes with my mouth shut, so long as the card says the right thing. They gave her the card. Of course they gave her the card. They also, because the foundation office runs on a template that has not changed since my mother, issued the maker's invitation in the usual form. Admit the author of the commissioned work and 1 companion. Made out to the name on the card. Made out to Sterling. I have gone over that invitation more times than is good for anybody. There is no version of it that is anybody's fault. The committee used its own form. Leo did the placement and never saw the maker's pass, which comes out of a different office. My wife asked for the one thing she had asked for all year, which was to be called by her own name. On a Thursday in January, in a foundation building with my mother's face on the stairs, an envelope went out addressed to a Sterling. The panel is 9 feet by 4 and it is made of glass that 3 separate organizations had thrown away. Most of it came off my own reject line, the low iron with the good edge, sorted by pallet and logged and fired in batches of 11 because that is what fits. And a quarter of it, the darker quarter, the part along the bottom that everybody thinks is deliberate and is in fact simply what there was, came out of a wooden crate that had stood in the back of a shop on Bevan Street for 9 years and had been carried out past a letting agent by a woman who did not say anything. She unpacked that crate in the second week of January. She had not touched it since October. She did not make a thing of it and neither did I. The mounting failed on the Sunday. Panel was finished, it was beautiful, it was in the yard on trestles under a tarpaulin, and the structural engineer the foundation uses looked at the fixing schedule and said the wall would not take the point loads on a 9-foot span with that dead weight and that they would need a spreader frame. Which meant the whole fixing system had to be remade, in 5 days, by somebody who did not have a workshop with a hoist in it. I got there at 7 on the Sunday evening and I stood in the doorway with my coat on and I did not say a single one of the 4 things I wanted to say. I did not ring the engineer. I did not offer to have it done at the works. I did not offer to pay for a frame to be fabricated overnight in Birmingham, which I could have arranged in about 9 minutes and which I had already, in my head, arranged. What do you need? I said. She looked up from the drawing. She looked at me for a good deal longer than the question required. 2 nights, she said. And somebody to hold things and not talk. You've got that. We did it on the Monday night and the Tuesday night. I got there at 8, after the office, and left at about 3, and did it again. I held things. I held a great many things. I drilled nothing, cut nothing, and decided nothing, and twice I said, would it be easier if, and both times she said no before I finished, and both times she was right. At about 1 on the Tuesday morning she said, without looking up, pass me the bag of the 16ths, and I passed her a bag with 3 bolts missing out of it. We spent 40 minutes looking for those bolts. We took the bench apart. She was on her hands and knees under the rack with a torch. At 20 to 2 she sat back on her heels in the middle of a shed on the eastern bypass and started laughing, and could not stop, and pointed at the carrier by the door. Otto had them. He had all 3 of them and a spanner he could not possibly lift and had been trying to anyway, and he had built a nest out of a dust sheet in the corner behind the kiln and put them in it. She got 2 of them back. He was extremely put out. The third one is presumably still there. At 2:30 on the Tuesday night she asked me to take the other end of the spreader frame, which was the first time in the whole year that she had asked me for anything, and I have thought about that more than I have thought about the kiss. Went up on the Thursday. It took 6 men and most of a morning, and I was not there for that either, because I had a thing I could not move and because she did not need me to be. I saw it that evening, in an empty hall, with the chairs still stacked. 9 feet of glass on a wall in a building named after my mother, and the light coming through the bottom quarter of it in a color I have never seen come out of any furnace I own. And a small card at the side, at eye level, which said Wren Sterling and then the name of the piece and then nothing else at all. My mother is on the stairs in the building in a photograph taken in the year she bought the second furnace, looking at the camera the way she looked at a result. She would have walked past that panel and read the card and said, "Good," and gone into the dinner. I stood in front of it for about 10 minutes on my own and then I went and found my wife in the corridor by the kitchens, where she was arguing with a man about where the lectern was going to stand, because if it stood where he wanted it, it would put a shadow across the bottom quarter. She won. She won it in about 90 seconds and the men went away perfectly happy, which is a thing she can do now and could not do in October. 2 other things were settled that week and neither of them came through me. The committee, who had an underspend and a hall with terrible acoustics, engaged a small live act for the reception rather than a quartet. 2 musicians, a guitar and a voice, 2 hours, standard fee, booked on the Tuesday through an agency on the recommendation of the caterer. An envelope addressed to a Sterling, which had been sitting on a hall table in a flat about 1.5 miles from my building since the Friday, was opened. I had a plan for the 9th of February and it was a good plan and I had been carrying it for a fortnight. Get through the evening. Get her home. Sit down at the counter on the Saturday morning with nothing in the diary and tell her about the cafe and the transfer and the 4 months, properly, slowly, in the order it happened, and take whatever came. I had even worked out where I would be standing. I have thought about that since, that I had staged my own confession, chosen the room, chosen the light. The hall was full by 7:30. The board came, all of them. Halvorsen came and brought 2 of her people and went and stood in front of the panel for a long time without saying anything, which is the highest compliment that woman pays. There was press, because there is always press at that evening, and my mother's photograph was on the stairs, and there were 200 people in a room in evening dress being pleasant to each other. Wren wore the grey thing. She had had it since October and had worn it twice, and it is the dullest garment I have ever seen, and she looked, to me, like the only person in the building. She had the card in her hand for most of the first hour. Not looking at it. Just holding it, the way you hold something you have not finished believing. I saw Dorian Fitch at 8:20 and it did not register as anything at all. He was in the corner by the service door with a guitar and a woman singer, playing quietly through the reception, in the same black shirt with the cuffs turned back, and he saw me and gave me the very small nod that a working musician gives a man whose room he is in. I thought, he did not leave after all, and I felt mildly sorry about it, and I went back to a conversation about toughening capacity. The speeches were short. The chair of the foundation spoke for 4 minutes and then they lit the panel. They did it properly. The room lights came down and the wall came up, and 9 feet of glass that 3 organizations had thrown away went from gray to something I am not going to attempt to describe, and there was a sound in that room that you cannot organize. And then the chair read out the card. The name of the piece. And the maker. Wren Sterling. I looked across at my wife and she was looking at the floor, and her ears had gone red, and she was completely still, and I have never in my life been prouder of anything I had nothing to do with. Vivienne came out of the crowd at the front while the applause was still going. She had a beautiful dress on. It was the kind of dress you buy for a room like that, and she had bought it, I found out later, in November, in the first fortnight, and it had cost about what a kiln costs. She went to the lectern and picked up the microphone off the stand, which nobody expects and which is why nobody stops it, and she said, "Sorry. Sorry. 2 minutes. I'm family." And 200 people, who had been told nothing, laughed, because that is what a room does. My name is Vivienne Sterling. That's my sister's panel. Isn't it beautiful? She let that get its round. She is very good. I want that understood. She held that room for 4 minutes and every professional communicator in it was standing still. 4 months ago I was engaged to Adrian Voss. I left. You'll all have read something about that. What you didn't read is that after I left, Adrian paid me £140,000 to leave the city and stop talking to journalists. She took her phone out and held it up over her head, and turned slowly, and there is a photograph of that in 2 newspapers. That's the transfer. 26th of November. His account, my account, his reference. I've had it printed as well, if anyone wants to look at it properly. The room did the thing rooms do, which is not a gasp. A room that size makes a low noise like a lorry going past outside. So I'd like to ask all of you a question. If he paid me £140,000 to go away, and she turned and looked at my wife, and her face was not cruel, and it was the worst thing I have ever seen anybody do to a sibling, then what do you think he paid her to stay? I have replayed the next 11 seconds more times than any other 11 seconds of my life. Because nobody had told her. Nobody in that building could have. There was not one person in that hall who knew there was a contract, and there is no document anywhere in the world with those 5 clauses on it, and the only copy that ever existed was, at that moment, in a nest behind a kiln on the Eastern Bypass. She had was one afternoon in November. She had watched a man who will not move £100 without a schedule move 140,000 off a telephone with nothing written down, and she had said so to his face at the time. And she had carried that for 3 months and asked it the only question it will answer, which is what a man like that is keeping the paperwork away from, and she had got all the way to the bottom of it on her own. I told myself for a long time afterwards that she had a bank transfer and a grudge. She had a bank transfer and a deduction. It was better work than anything I did that year. She did it in 1 sentence in public, and she did not need a document to do it. And I looked at my wife. Wren was standing about 4 yards from me with a card in her hand, and I watched her hear it, and I watched her understand which thing it was. 10 days earlier I had stood in a kitchen and told her that there was something, that it was about her sister, that it was mine and not a promise I had made to somebody else, and that I would tell her after the 9th. It was the 9th. And she was finding out what it was in a hall with 200 people in it, out of her sister's mouth, into a microphone, with her own name lit up on the wall behind her. I had 2 moves. I have gone over this with a degree of thoroughness that is probably not healthy, and there were 2. The first was to say nothing. Vivienne had a bank transfer, which proves that money moved and nothing else. There is no crime in it. I could have said we would not be commenting on a family matter and had her walked out, and by Tuesday it would have been an unpleasant story about an unstable woman at a charity dinner, and the board would have backed me, and it would have worked. The second was the morning of the wedding. I could have said it in 9 words. I could have stood in that hall and told 200 people that Vivienne Sterling ran because she sat on a staircase at 5 in the morning and heard her own father tell a creditor what she was worth. It would have ended her version in 1 sentence. It is also true. And I would have had to say the number out loud, in a room containing both of Roland Sterling's daughters, and the second half of that sentence is not about Vivienne at all. The second half is that the family then produced the other one. I would have destroyed the woman at the lectern by explaining, to a room full of my wife's clients, exactly what my wife's family had priced her at. I had given my word in a car park in the rain to a man who was buying his way out of this story with it, and he was standing 40 feet away in a black shirt with his hands on a guitar. So I took the microphone off her, and I did the only thing that was left, which was the third one, and it is the only genuinely good decision I made in 4 months. Everything she has just said about the money is true, I said. I have never heard a room go like that. It is not silence. Silence is empty. That was 200 people all deciding at once to hear the next sentence. I paid Vivienne Sterling £140,000 in November. She had given an interview and there was a line in it about my wife and I wanted it to stop. She did not ask me for the money in those terms. I worked out the figure myself, at a table, in about 4 minutes, and I sent it from my phone before the coffee came. My chief operating officer told me to my face that it was a mistake and I did it anyway. My assistant asked me to go home and tell my wife that night and I did not. I could see Priya at a table on the left. She did not move a muscle, and I did not tell my wife. Not that night, not the week after, not at any point in the 11 weeks after that. She found out about it 4 minutes ago, from a lectern, in a room where her own work is on the wall. Somebody at the back said something to somebody else and was told to be quiet. There was an agreement between my wife and me when we married. That part is true as well, and nobody in this room was ever told it. The woman at that lectern worked it out. She worked it out off something I did in front of her in a cafe in November, and she is the only person in this hall who did, and I would like that on the record with the rest of it. Was 1 year. There was money in it and there were conditions in it, and 4 of the 5 conditions were hers and one of those was that I was never to lie to her. So you have got it more or less right. I bought a Monday in October and I have spent 4 months finding out what that costs. And then I said the last part, and it is the only part one I'm still glad about. The agreement was ended 10 days ago. I ended it, in writing, on my own, before there was any commission and before anybody in this room knew there was going to be a panel on that wall. There is nothing owed in either direction and there has not been for 10 days. Everything she has done since the 30th of January she has done as a free person, including standing in this building tonight, and the piece behind me was commissioned by people who do not answer to me and who did not know I existed when they voted on it. That's all of it. Anybody who wants to write it down has got it. I have been told since, by 3 separate people, that I said all of that in the voice I use for quarterly results. I do not doubt it. It is the only voice I have got. I put the microphone down and my wife walked past me and picked it up. She had never used a microphone in her life. She held it much too close and the first 2 words came out enormous and she moved it and started again. I'm not going to talk about my marriage. That's mine. She looked at the room and then stopped looking at the room. I've got one question and it isn't for my husband. My sister has just said a number. £140,000. In November my father came to see me in a car park and offered me a building. And I asked him what it was worth, and he had the figure ready before I finished the question, which he never does, and it was the same number. She turned. Roland Sterling was standing at the side of the room, by the 3rd pillar, in the suit he has had a long time. Dad. 2 people got to the same figure from opposite ends of this and I don't understand how. So I'm asking you, in front of everybody, because I've never once got an answer in private. Have you ever put a price on either of us? I want to describe what happened next accurately, because everybody who was there describes it wrongly. He did not deny it. He did not shout, he did not walk out, and he did not say a word. He stood by the 3rd pillar with 200 people looking at him and he did the arithmetic. You could watch him do it. He worked out what each answer would cost and he could not find one that was cheaper than nothing, and so he chose nothing, and he stood there and let the silence run. It ran for about 9 seconds. 9 seconds is an extraordinarily long time in a room like that. And then Wren said, "Right," and put the microphone back on the stand. In the corner, by the service door, Dorian Fitch was playing. He had not stopped. He had gone quieter when the chair started speaking and quieter again when Vivienne took the microphone, and he had never once stopped, and he was still playing when she asked her question and he was still playing afterwards. Did not look up. He did not look at Vivienne once the entire evening. He played the rest of his set and packed his case at 10:30 and was paid at the desk like everybody else who worked that room. And I watched perhaps 40 people in that hall work out who he was, because a good third of them had read the piece in December, and I watched the story about the woman who left for love die in absolute silence with nobody saying anything at all. The room did not turn as one. That is the thing nobody gets right afterwards. A table near the front believed Vivienne for the entire evening and left believing her, and one of them wrote to the foundation about it, and I have the letter. 2 of my board stopped believing her at the word transfer and have never fully forgiven me, and one of them told me Southwest in the car park in a manner I deserved. A great many people watched Roland Sterling stand by that pillar and went home with an opinion about a father and no opinion whatsoever about a marriage. And perhaps 80 people were at the bar, or in the cloakroom, or talking about a job in Leeds, and heard about the whole thing on Monday and were annoyed to have missed it. Vivienne was left standing beside the lectern with a phone in her hand and a photograph of a bank transfer on it, and no room at all, because I had agreed with her. She stood there for a while and then she picked up her bag. Nobody stopped her. Nobody spoke to her. 200 people in evening dress managed not to look at her all the way to the door, which is the cruelest thing that room could have done, and it did it without any coordination whatsoever. I found Wren by the kitchens, in the corridor where she had won the argument about the lectern. She was not crying. She was holding the card. "You said after the 9th, she said. "I know. It's the 9th. Wren, I was going to, tomorrow. At the counter. On Saturday morning with nothing in the diary." She looked up. "Of course you were. You'd have done it beautifully. I've been standing in there doing arithmetic, because that's what I've learned off you. Do you know how many evenings there were? Between the cafe and tonight. Wren. About 75. I did it twice. 75 evenings, and one of them was Ardley, and you had your hand on the back of my neck and you said there's something I have to tell you, and I stood there and didn't ask, because I decided that not asking was the loving thing to do." She put her hand flat against the wall for a second. "I have never in my life been so pleased with myself as I was that night. I've thought about it every day since, and I've been so pleased about how well I was doing it." "That's mine," I said. "That's not yours to carry." "No, it isn't, and that's the worst part, and I'm going to be angry about it for about a year." She straightened up. "Here's the thing I actually came out here to say, so listen. Made me free. On the 30th. In writing, on a piece of paper, before you had to, when it cost you everything, and you did it the night you found out she hadn't left. I know why you did it and I know what it cost, and I am not going to pretend it wasn't the best thing anybody has ever done for me. So I'm going to use it," she said. "That's what it was for." And she gave me the card with her own name on it, which I did not understand at the time and which I have on a shelf, and she went out through the kitchens because she did not want to cross the hall. I did not follow her. I want that on the record too, because it is the first time in my life that I have wanted something and had no instrument for it at all. I could not fix it. I could not buy it, schedule it, delegate it, or draft it. There was no clause left. I had cancelled every single one of them myself, 10 days earlier, on purpose, and it was the only good thing I had done, and it had left me standing in a service corridor with nothing in my hands. The most disgusting thing about that February is that it was good for me. I stood in a hall and told 200 people that I had paid a woman to go away and hidden it from my wife, and by the following Thursday my own registrar was telling me that the shares had come up. Not much. Enough that nobody could say it had hurt us. A trade weekly ran a column about a chief executive who had closed his own bad venture and then stood up at a dinner and named his own failure without being asked, and used the word discipline twice. 2 clients rang me personally. One of them said it was the first honest thing he had heard from anybody in the industry in 10 years. He meant it. He was extremely warm about it. I had told the truth for the first time in 4 months at the exact moment when telling it happened to be worth money, and I had lost the only thing I cared about doing it, and everybody wanted to congratulate me. Priya came in on the Friday and did not sit down. You'll be told a great deal this week about how well you handled that. I've noticed. It wasn't handling. You had nothing left. There's a difference, and I don't want you learning the wrong lesson from a good outcome, because you are extremely good at that. Thank you. That wasn't kindness, it was quality control. She got as far as the door. For what it's worth, the panel commission stands. That is entirely unaffected, and it is nothing to do with you, and if she withdraws it I will be very cross with her personally. The letter came on the Monday, from a solicitor I had not heard of, on behalf of Roland Sterling, and it was 4 pages long, and it was the saddest document I have ever been sent. It alleged, without quite alleging anything, that Voss Glass had closed the joint venture in the knowledge that the closure would move the share price, and that this had caused loss to a party who had taken a position on the basis of publicly available information. It took my legal department about an hour and a half to establish what had actually happened, because the position was not hidden. There was nothing to hide. He had done it in his own name through a retail broker. In January, 4 weeks after I closed the venture in front of him through a glass wall, Roland Sterling had borrowed against the house on the good road and put the whole of it into a bet that Voss Glass shares were going to fall. He was completely certain. He had spent 4 months building a picture in which I had married into his family in order to strip his capacity, and a man who has decided you are running a scheme cannot hear the words "there is no line in the spring" as anything except the first move of it. So when the closure came, he read it exactly as he had read every other event of his life, which is as the beginning of somebody else's plan, and he did the one thing his whole character had been rehearsing. The shares did not fall. They came up an eighth. A company had cut a loss and its chief executive had stood up and said so. The bet burned in 11 days. The house went with it, because the house was in it. Sterling fabrication stopped in the last week of February, and the 40 people got 3 weeks' notice, and the man who makes the dies was owed for 11 months and got nothing at all. Did not do any of that to him. I have gone through it more times than I can defend, and there is no version in which I did. He was on that road before I met his daughter, and I closed a bad venture 11 weeks after 11 people told me to, and the rest of it was arithmetic he did on his own kitchen table. He would not have needed me at all. That is the part one have made my peace with least. What follows I did not know for 4 months. She told me the whole of it much later, in a corridor, standing up, in about 6 minutes, and I am putting it here because this is where it belongs. He came to the shed on the 1st of March. She had been living over a shop near the yard since the 10th of February, on the money in the account, which she had not touched except for the rent, and she was doing 14-hour days because the panel commission had brought 2 inquiries and she had said yes to both. He waited in the car park, which is what he does. And when she came out he stood up and he said, "Mrs. Voss." It took her a second to work out that he was talking to her. 24 years of Wren, and darling when there were people, and your sister when there were not. Now on the 1st of March, in a yard on the eastern bypass, 3 weeks after she had put her own name on a wall in front of 200 people, her father called her by her husband's surname and used the formal you. It is the single most frightening thing he has ever done to her, and she understood immediately what it was for. It was not respect. He was serving a notice. He was addressing the wife of the company that had done this to him. He wanted money. He did it in the full version this time. The house, her mother, the 40 people, the men with the dies, and then the part he had clearly been building for a fortnight, which was that she had sat in his car park in November and told him there was no line in the spring. You told me. You put me in it. Whatever else anybody says happened, that came out of your mouth. Yes. It did. 2/3 of that's mine and I wrote it down at the time and I'll say it to anybody. Then you'll help me. No. He did not shout even then. He stood in the middle of that car park and explained it to her very reasonably, the way you explain an invoice to somebody who has not been opening the post. 140,000 holds the house for a year. That is the whole of it, and a year is all I am asking for. You have got 140,000 sitting in an account doing nothing at all. Everybody in this family knows where that came from and everybody in this family knows what it was for. It's not for that. It's not for anything. It's sitting there. It's a wage. I worked the year. Wren. And when he dropped the Mrs. Voss he sounded, for about 4 seconds, exactly like her father, and that was the worst part of the afternoon, not the rest of it. You have never in your life had to look at somebody and tell them they've lost their job. No. I've had to sit in a room while somebody told me I had. He did not give him anything. She did not shout at him and she did not throw the 2/3 back at him, and she has never once told anybody in that family about the transfer to her sister, which she could have done at any point and which would have finished him. I'm not going to talk about money with you again, she said. Not this year, not in 10 years, not at your funeral. Then she got in the car, and he stood in the mirror the whole way to the road. Her mother rang on the Sunday and asked her to come to the house. She went. She had said in October that she would never sit in that room again, and she went anyway, and she knew before she got in the car exactly what she was going for. She was going to close it, and she wanted to do it in person, because doing it by telephone would have been her mother's way. The kitchen had a lighter rectangle on the wall in it by then as well. The clearance people had been through the front rooms. Elaine made tea. She did that first, and it took 20 minutes, and Wren let her, because it was the last time. Then she asked, and she asked well, and she had had 3 weeks to prepare it and she used every hour of it. 40 years, Wren. 40 years in this house, and I have never once asked anybody in this family for anything, and I'm not going to start by asking you for something I can put a name to. He hasn't slept properly since the 22nd. He hasn't been out of that door. He won't say it to you and he won't say it to your sister, and there is nobody else left in this house for him to say it to. Then she went round it, and she had a route, and she did not once step off it, and every stop on it was true, which is what made it impossible to stand in front of. First the house, which was not about the house. The boilerman was coming on Thursday and there was a question of whether to have him at all, and did Wren think a person ought to spend on a boiler in a house they might not be in by the summer. Then the sideboard, which had gone. Elaine said she did not mind about the sideboard. She said it twice, and the second time she said it she looked at the wall where it had stood, and let her daughter look at it as well. Then the 40 people, one of whom Wren had been at school with, and whose mother Elaine had seen in the town on the Friday and had crossed the road to avoid, and had not been quick enough. Then Vivienne, and this was the good one. Elaine said she was glad her elder daughter had somewhere. She said the hotel was a proper job with a contract and holiday and that she was proud of her, and every word of it was warm and every word of it was true. And then she stopped, and let the fact that one daughter had been provided for lie in the middle of her own kitchen table with nothing whatever attached to it. And she said, "You've done ever so well, love," and put her hand flat on the cloth, and asked her younger daughter how the shed was going, and listened to the answer for 4 minutes. She did not once use the word money. She sat at her own table with her hands round a cup and got the entire thing across without it, and it is the best piece of work that woman has ever done. And the worst part of it was that none of it was a trick. Every item on the table was true and every item was frightening her, and if her mother had asked for £140,000 in the first minute it would have been easier to refuse and a very great deal easier to forgive. And Wren said no. She said it once, flat, and then she said the rest of it, and she has thought about every word of it every day since. You gave Bevan Street to Vivienne because she screamed on your stairs for 11 hours. That's what it's for. That's what it has always been for in this house. Whoever makes the most noise gets paid and the quiet one covers it. It's not, Mum. It's not an accusation. It's just the arrangement, and I was in it for 24 years and I only worked it out in October. I'm not paying for the quiet anymore. Not with money, not with sitting here, not with being reasonable about it at Christmas. That's finished, and it's not because of Dad and it's not because of Vivienne. And then she offered her the one thing she had. There's a room over the shop. It's small and it's above a tire place and it's mine and it's paid for until October. You can have it. Tonight, or in a week, or in a year. You can come with a bag and no explanation and I will never once ask you about him, and I won't tell anybody, and there's a lock on the door. Her mother did not speak for a very long time. The tea went cold in front of both of them. Then Elaine said, "He'd have nobody." "I know. 40 years, Wren." "I know. You don't." "No," Wren said. "I don't. That's why I'm offering and not telling." And Elaine Sterling put her hand flat on her own kitchen table and said, "I'm going to stay." "But I can't. Not one day." She chose it, out loud, with the offer sitting in front of her and the door open behind her, and my wife has never once let anybody in this story pretend that it was anything other than a choice. "All right," Wren said. Then she stood up and put her cup in the sink and rinsed it, because she always does. "That's it, then. Don't be like that." "I'm not being like anything. You've picked and I'd have thought less of you if you'd said it in a month instead of now. Will you ring?" And my wife stood in her mother's kitchen and did the only unkind thing she has ever done, which was tell the truth on the way out of a room. "No," she said. "Because you'd ask me for money, and then I'd have to say no to you on the telephone, and I'd rather the last time I did it was in a room where you could see my face." She was on the bypass before 6. She did not cry in the car, which she has always treated as a failing of hers. She got back to the yard and put a batch in and sat with it, because the last part is the part you have to be there for, and it came down clean. I did not know one word of any of that at the time. I was in a glass office being congratulated on my honesty. I did nothing for 4 months and it was the hardest work I have ever done. I want to set out exactly what nothing consisted of, because I had to invent it, and there was no version of me before that year that could have managed it. I did not go to the yard. I did not write. I did not send anything. There was a fortnight in April when I very nearly did, and I am going to put it in, because leaving it out would be the same offense in a smaller font. I had wrapped the piece of green glass that had been on my counter since October, the one the size of a plum with the curved break down one side, and I had written the address of the yard on the front of it in my own hand. It sat on the passenger seat for most of that fortnight. On the second Friday I drove out along the bypass and went past the turning, and told myself it was the lorry from the remolder, and came round at the roundabout and went past it again the other way. Then I drove home with it and put it back on the counter, because a parcel is a thing you send when you want an answer, and I had decided I was not entitled to ask the question. I did not ring the landlord of the shop she was living over. I did not have a word with Halvorsen. I did not put her in front of anybody. I did not do the thing I wanted to do about 6 times a week, which was arrive at that shed at 9 in the evening and be extremely reasonable at her for 2 hours, because that was the entire problem. That was what I had done in her parents' dining room with a chair, and in a car park with a valuation open on my telephone, and every single time it had been correct, and every single time it had taken something off her. She had walked out of a hall with her own name on a wall and used the one piece of freedom I had ever actually given her. If I turned up in that yard with a speech, I would have been taking it straight back. So I stayed away, and I told myself it was restraint, and about half of it was cowardice, and I have never been able to separate the two. The order came through in the 3rd week of March. We were fitting out the new finishing hall at the works, and there is an internal specification for glazed partitions and a clerestory run along the north side. Priya put it through procurement. I found out about it the way I find out about everything at that level now, which is a line in a board paper. Beside it, in the notes column, in the format that department uses for everything, there was a sentence which I have kept and which will do for my epitaph. Chair excluded from this line by written instruction of the 30th of January. I read that in a meeting with 14 other people and had to put the paper down for a moment. Priya rang me afterwards, because she does not leave things before you ask, and you are going to ask. It went out to 4 suppliers. 2 came back over budget, 1 came back with a lead time I could not use, and 1 came back with laboratory results, a batch log and a price. I'm not asking. You are. You've got the face on down a telephone line, which I did not know was possible. Then she said the thing I have always been most grateful to her for, and she said it in the voice she uses for depreciation. I want it on the record between us, because it will matter to her one day and she will believe you if you can say it properly. This is not a favor and it is not an apology and it has nothing to do with your marriage. I bought it because it is the best material I can get for that run and because the woman who makes it hands me a log of everything she has broken. My quality department does not do that and I have been trying to make them do it since 2019. Have you told her that? In writing, Priya said. In the covering note. She replied in 9 minutes at 11:30 at night, which I understand is a family trait. The rest of it is hers as well. I have put it where it happened rather than where I heard it, and I have not tidied any of it. By April she was running 4 batches a week in a shed with 1 phase and a bucket under the roof. She hired the horsebox man's nephew 2 days a week to do the lifting and the packing, and paid him properly, and he is still there. The tire remolder sign is above his door and has been photographed by 2 magazines. She got the whole of the Voss run out in 9 weeks. And in the 2nd week of May, for the first time since she had started keeping it, she ran a batch of 84 panels and did not write anything in the book. Nothing cracked. Nothing bowed. Nothing came out of the lair with a stress pattern in it. There was no entry, no cause, no schedule, and no share of fault infractions. She sat and looked at the blank page for about 10 minutes and found it genuinely upsetting, which I understand completely and which nobody else I have ever met would. Otto had by then taken over the top shelf, where the reference samples live, on the grounds that it is warm, high, and full of small bright objects belonging to somebody else. He is not permitted up there. He has been not permitted up there since January. He sleeps on the 2nd row and there is a color swatch missing from the greens that has never been recovered. The money was still in the account. All of it. She had taken the rent on the room over the shop out of it and put it back in July when the first invoices cleared, so that the balance would be right. She went to see her sister on a Tuesday at the end of May. Vivienne had been working since March in the events office of a hotel out by the Ring Road. Not the front of house. The office behind it, with a headset, doing group bookings and function inquiries. She books weddings. That is what she does now. She has done it for years at the time of writing and she is extremely good at it and she has never once made a joke about it in my hearing. Wren went to the hotel because she had run out of things to be afraid of, which is the only reason she has ever done anything. Talked in the car park for about 40 minutes, because Vivienne had a break at 4 and there is a bench by the bins. She asked her about the morning of the wedding. He said there was something. In October. He said he'd promised somebody and that the only person who could tell me was you, and I've had it sitting in me for 7 months and I'd like it now. And Vivienne told her. On a bench by the bins at a hotel out by the Ring Road, in a uniform with a name badge on it, she told her sister about the staircase. 5 in the morning. The man in the front room who was not a friend of theirs. Her mother not coming down, and her mother always comes down. Her father explaining that the wedding closed it, and that the money was effectively already in the building. And the figure. She did not react at all for about a minute. Then she said, "That's why you went." "That's why I went. You never told me. You'd have gone straight in and asked him and he'd have said I was hysterical, and then I'd have had nowhere to go and no story. I'd have believed you. Nobody in that house has ever believed me about anything, and I gave them a great deal of help with that, and I know it." Then Vivienne said, "How long has he known?" "Since November." "Adrian's known since November." "Yes. And my sister-in-law sat on a bench by some bins in a uniform and worked out, in front of my wife, that a man she had stood up in front of 200 people and accused of buying. His own marriage had been carrying the one thing that would have ended her, for 3 months, and had not used it. Not at the dinner. Not in the letters. Not to the solicitor. Not once." "Why not?" "Because it isn't only about you," Wren said. "It's about what Dad said about you, and the second half of that sentence is what they did with me. He'd have had to say the number out loud in a room I was standing in because he gave somebody his word." "Who?" "He's never told me." She watched her sister work through the very short list. "I think it's Dorian," Vivienne said. "Dorian's gone." "I know. He went in February. He didn't tell me. I found out from a woman at the agency in April, and he didn't take anything off anybody, and he's got a residency somewhere and I don't know where." There was, Wren said, a fairly long silence at that point. There was no forgiveness on that bench. I want that recorded accurately because people always want there to have been. Vivienne did not apologize for the lectern and Wren did not tell her it was all right, and neither of them said anything at all about the 200 people. What happened was that a woman in a name badge told her sister the truth about a staircase, and her sister said thank you, and they agreed, without ever putting it in words, that they were two people who now knew the same thing. They see each other perhaps 3 times a year. It is not warm. It is honest, which in that family is considerably rarer. Wren drove back to the yard and put a batch in and sat with it. And this is the part she told me last, and it is the reason I am able to write any of this down. She said that somewhere around the second week of June she had a decision to make about a sizing machine, which is a boring decision involving £4,000 and a delivery date, and that she stood in the shed with the specification in her hand for 20 minutes and could not do it. Not because she did not know the answer. She knew the answer. She had known it in about 90 seconds. She said she stood there wanting to say it to somebody who would argue with her. Not somebody to approve it. Not somebody to pay for it. She has money and she has never in her life needed permission. She wanted the second person in the decision, and she had had one, for about 11 weeks between December and February, and she had not known what it was until it was not there. I'd have known what he'd say, she told me. That was the annoying part. I'd have known exactly what he'd say and I still wanted him to say it. She bought the machine. It was the right machine. It is still in that shed. I did not come. I had 4 months of Fridays and I did not come, and I told myself every single one of them that arriving would be another chair carried across a dining room in front of her parents. Which was true, and which was also, I am now certain, the last and best excuse I ever built for not doing the frightening thing, and I would have gone on building it indefinitely if a man on my payroll had not got down on his hands and knees behind a kiln. I sold the flat in June. I did not make a decision about it so much as notice, one Sunday, that I had been living in my mother's idea of a room for 5 years and that the only period in which it had ever been warm was the one in which somebody had put a kettle on in it without asking. Leo ran the clearance, because Leo runs everything, and because he had by then been made chief of staff and was in the process of handing his old job to a woman called Annika who is better at it than he ever was and who has told me so. He rang me on the Thursday of the second week. The kitchen units are coming out. Right. There's a void behind the plinth that runs the whole length of the run, and it goes back the better part of a foot, and it is not empty. I could hear the clearance men behind him. They had stopped working. 2 of them had opinions about how long it had taken to build, and one of them wanted to know whether the animal was still on the premises. Leo has carried that animal through a board meeting in a canvas bag. He told the men no, and he set it down that phone with a great deal more confidence than he had any right to. I sat down. He photographed it before he touched it, which is the most Leo Marchetti sentence in this account. A dust sheet, dragged in through a gap, and built into a bowl. A pen cap. A hair clip, a foil seal. 3 16mm bolts, which had traveled from a shed on the eastern bypass in a carrier between a kiln and a box of tools and had been in that flat since January. A cufflink, which was not mine, and which I have never been able to account for, and, folded in four, flattened, entirely dry, at the bottom of the bowl where the weight of everything else had pressed it into the shape of the floor, a heavy linen-look napkin with 5 clauses on it in builder's pencil and 2 signatures at the bottom. Have you got it in your hand? I have. Bring it in tomorrow. No, Leo said. There was a pause of a length that I have learned, over 5 years, means that the next thing is going to be non-negotiable. It's hers. She wrote 4 of the 5 and she put it in her pocket in the first place, and you have had it in your building for 9 months without knowing. I'm not handing it to you so that you can decide what to do with it. Leo, I'll take it to her myself. Tomorrow morning, on my own time, and I'm not going to say anything to her about you, and I'd rather you didn't ask me what she says. That's the second time you've refused me. Third. There was a car park in November you don't know about. He cleared his throat. I'd like Fridays as well. Done. The finishing hall handover was on the 21st of June. It is a boring event. There is a walk round with the contractor and the client and a list, and somebody from the fabricator comes to sign off their own work, and it takes about 2 hours and there are biscuits. Pia put me on the client side of it, which she did not have to do, and which she has never once admitted was deliberate. I went on my own. No car, no Leo, and nothing in my hands at all, which I had to keep checking, because a man in my position is never in a room without a folder, and I had not understood until that morning that the folder is a place to put your hands. She came at 11 with the nephew and a clipboard and a box of shims, in the boots she had bought second-hand in October, and she went round that clear-story run for 1 hour and 40 minutes and found 2 things wrong with her own glass before the contractor found one. The nephew did not know who I was. He had been told there would be a client and that he was to be polite to the client, and at about 11:30 he put one end of a baton into my hands and said, "Hold that steady, you're the tallest." Did not speak to her during the walk round. She looked at me twice. Neither of us made anything of it. And afterwards, when the contractor had gone off to the canteen with the list, she picked up the empty shim box and went out through the door at the end, into the service corridor that runs behind the hall, where the cleaners keep the machines and where there is a light that has never worked. I followed her. It is a corridor with a concrete floor and a fire door at the far end, and it smells of wet cardboard. We got married in a room like that. Not the ceremony. The part that mattered. You've been on the client side all morning, she said. Yes. Priya did that. Priya did that. I know, Wren said. She told me on the phone in April. She said, and I'm quoting, that she was not going to interfere but that she was going to be extremely poor at scheduling. Put the shim box down on a floor polisher. Then she took a folded napkin out of her jacket pocket, and put it on top of the box, and did not say anything about it. I said the whole of it standing in that corridor, and it took about 9 minutes and she did not interrupt once. I told her about the cafe. Not the summary, the whole thing. The bench outside my building where her sister had done her face. The plate I handed over a doorway to a hungry woman in front of 2 witnesses and called kindness. I told her that I had done the arithmetic on Vivienne out loud, at the table, because I always do, and that I had got to the figure in 4 minutes. And then I told her the part one had never told anybody, which is that when I said the number, her sister laughed, and I laughed as well. I laughed, I said. That's the bit. Not the money. I've paid people off before and I'd probably do it again for a company. We sat in a cafe and had a nice moment about a good negotiation. And the negotiation was a person, and it was your sister, and I enjoyed it for about 4 seconds and I have not been able to get rid of that. That's the thing I couldn't say in the kitchen. Not the transfer. The 4 seconds. She did not say anything, and I scheduled it, I said. That's the rest. I didn't decide to keep it from you. I put it after the 20th, and then after the 9th, and I'd have put it after something else. That's not a failure of nerve, it's the only way I know how to hold anything. And I learned it off a woman who put glass walls in a building so she'd never have to be in the room. I'm not going to offer you anything. I've thought about that for 4 months. Everything I've got is a thing I'd be arranging, and you've had enough of those, and the last one I arranged I carried across your mother's dining room. The extractor over the fire door was going and neither of us moved. So I've got a question and then I'm going to stand here and wait for the answer, and you can say no, and if you say no I'll say thank you and go back into that hall and sign your hand over. And Priya will still buy your glass next year because Priya doesn't care what either of us wants. I have made 3 or 4 speeches in my life that people remember. This was not one of them. My voice went. "What do you want?" And my wife stood in a service corridor with her hand on a shim box and looked at me, and I watched somebody hear a question she had been waiting for since she was about 9. It took a long time. "I want that written down," because everyone assumed she answered straight away, and she did not. She took the best part of a minute and I stood there and let it run, and it was the hardest minute of my life and it is the only thing I did that day that I am proud of. "There's a sizing machine in my shed," she said. "Right." In June I stood in front of the specification for 20 minutes and I could not buy it. I knew the answer in about 90 seconds. I'd worked it out, it was the right machine, I had the money, and I stood there like an idiot. Why? Because I wanted to say it out loud to somebody who'd argue with me about it. Not somebody to sign it off. Not somebody to pay for it. I've got money, I've had money since October and it's still sitting there. She looked at the floor. I wanted the second person in the decision. I had one for about 11 weeks and I didn't know what it was until it wasn't there. That's what I want. That's the answer. It's very unromantic and I've had 4 months to make it better and it hasn't got better. Then she picked up the napkin off the shim box and unfolded it, and it had been folded so long and pressed so flat that it stayed in the shape it had been in. 5 clauses. 2 signatures. 9 months in a nest behind a plinth. "Leo brought me this yesterday morning," she said. "He drove out to the yard before work and gave it to me in the car park and wouldn't come in and wouldn't take a coffee, and told me he'd found it in a void and that it was mine." "I know. He said he hadn't shown it to you. Is that right?" "He photographed it and described it to me on the telephone and refused to bring it in. That's what he said." She turned it round so it faced me. "I thought I'd want to tear it up. I've been thinking about tearing it up since February. I got it out 4 times yesterday, and it's the only thing either of us has ever written down and I'm not sentimental about paper." She put her thumb on the first line, the one at the top, in her own handwriting, in builder's pencil, from a store cupboard on the 11th of October. "One stays. Not on paper. There's no paper. The rest of it's finished, the year's finished, the money's finished, the appearances are finished, and you cancelled all of it yourself in January before I asked you to, and I've read that sheet about 80 times. But that one stays, and it goes both ways now, because I have got things I don't want to say to you as well, and I have found out this year that I am considerably better at not saying things than I thought I was. So I'll go first, and then you'll know it's real." She put the napkin down on the shim box. "The dinner. When I asked him in front of everybody, and he stood by that pillar, and he had nothing." 9 seconds, I said. "You counted. Everybody in that hall counted. I've told 4 people since that I was frightened, and that I wished I hadn't done it, and that it got away from me in the moment." She was looking at the floor polisher. "None of that is true." I knew what I was doing and I knew he had no answer before I opened my mouth, because I have known that man for 24 years and I have never once seen him with one. Could have stopped it after 3 and I didn't. I have thought about those 9 seconds every week since February, and the reason I think about them is not that I feel bad about them. She looked up. "It's that they are the best 9 seconds of my life. I did to my father in a room full of people the exact thing I sat in a car and told you never to do to me. And I loved it. And I'd do it again tomorrow." "Wren, don't be kind about it. I'll never say it out loud again." She squared the edges of the napkin against the box with both hands. "You had 4 seconds in a cafe and you didn't mean them. I've got 9 at a pillar and I meant every one. So that's the clause, and that's the whole of it. 1 line, no document, and if either of us breaks it there's nothing to enforce. That's not much." "No," Wren said. "It's just a promise. That's what they are when you take the paper away." She folded it back up along the old creases and put it in her pocket, and I heard it go in with the broken glass, exactly the way it had gone in the first time, on a Saturday afternoon, in a room with a dish rack in it. "Then ask me your other question," she said. "The one you didn't ask. I haven't got a ring and I haven't booked anything and I've got no plan whatsoever." "I know. That's the only reason I'm still standing here." So I asked her, in a service corridor, with the extractor going, and no paper, and no advantage, and no idea at all what she was going to say.
"So, what do you think about Adrian and the way this story ended? He spent most of his life believing that being able to put a value on everything made him powerful. Money, debt, freedom, obligation. If something had a price, then he could understand it. But the story keeps proving that the moment you start deciding what another person's choices are worth, you are already dangerously close to taking those choices away. And what makes it more interesting is that neither Adrian nor she gets to walk away completely innocent. He made decisions for her because he believed he knew what was best. Then later, she did the same thing to her father and knowingly let him suffer for those extra few seconds, simply because, in that moment, she wanted him to. So maybe the real relationship here was never built on kindness, money, or even forgiveness. It was built on the one rule they finally managed to keep. Do not lie to me, even when telling the truth costs you something. Do you think Adrian truly changed by the end? Or did he simply learn a better way to control the instincts he already had? And do you think she was justified in what she did to her father? Or did that moment prove she was more like Adrian than either of them wanted to admit? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more.